This joint work session between the Town Council and School Committee. It is Wednesday, March 13th. The time is 7:07 or so. Let's all pledge the flag. Thank you. All right, but before we begin tonight, I think Brian's asked very wisely that we hold a moment of silence in prayer for the three students who have been injured in the car crash this past weekend. So. All right, thank you. All right, with that, let's have a discussion regarding the school's 2019-2020 school unrestricted fund.
Mr. President, if I may, I'm going to hand this over very quickly, but I do want to address very quickly just one thing that I want folks to make sure that the public understand, and I think the school committee and the town council understand it fully well. But the property tax transfer concept is that the town can collect taxes. We can levy taxes on real estate and tangible property, and with the authority of the council can transfer some of that tax that we collect to the school department. Last year, we transferred $54 million of tax money to the school for its operations. What is being proposed so far in the budget process this year is an additional $540,000. So instead of $54 million, it'll be $54,540,000 in addition, the additional $540,000 being the 1%. I've heard folks have written in saying, I can't believe you're only giving 1% of the property tax to the schools. In fact, the property tax levy, 76% of all of the property taxes we collect go towards school operations. So it's not that we're giving 1% of a much larger number. It's 76% of what we levy, and it's 1% in addition to what was given last year. I will point out that that number, that $540,000, is supplemented this year, excuse me, with an additional $500,000 that will go toward debt service on the school construction project that we're anticipating will be successful at some point in the future. So while the proposal to date has been a 1% property tax transfer for operations, in total we're about 2% tax commitment to the school program so far this year. I just wanted to make sure folks understood the bounds there.
Kristen, Marion?
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much for acknowledging our students at the onset of your meeting. That's really important. It's very appreciated. So what we've developed for you today is a very brief PowerPoint so that we can make sure that we're focusing our conversation. Do you have the toggle to be able to go down? Elbow you. Okay. So would you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Just as a reminder, on February 12th, the school committee approved a budget in the amount of $61,797,342, which would necessitate a 2.5% property tax transfer. And we were notified just before that meeting that we would be shorted an additional $90,000 in state aid to our town. And so that was another piece that we didn't know about the last time we met with you. That budget reduction plan in that amount These are the items, and you all have, if you don't have a paper copy, we brought paper copies. Did you pass them out, paper? So we have paper copies of this for you as well and for the audience. And either they're right behind Mrs. Massinanti, and if she could take the pile and turn them, thank you. And then it's projected also on the big screen. So these are the non-personnel items, and you'll notice there's equipment and there's stipends to employees. There's I can go through them all. Storage shed, carpet. P accounts are principal accounts, so those are school supplies. So we reduced an additional 15% of the school supplies. There's an IT reduction and athletic supplies reduction. We have had in the past a summer bridge program for children preschool to kindergarten. We've reduced that. Supplies, the energy manager stipend, that work would need to go to the maintenance director. The nursing coordinator stipend, that work would need to be absorbed by each principal. CARES and SMILE, a plow that we had anticipated buying. We reduced academic proficiency center. We made a reduction but did not eliminate the late buses. Excuse me. We did an additional reduction to legal and textbooks and health insurance, and the school committee omitted their travel expense for next year, where they typically would go to a conference on school committee work, and they omitted the stipends that they receive. And we also reduced non-public textbooks by $2,000. This is the personnel piece. There are a total reduction, I'm so sorry, in this group of 3.5 FTEs. A senior IT employee who resigned, we would not be filling that position. We're going to offset it with 2 technology clerks in the ESP bargaining unit. A reduction of a current 0.5 RTI coordinator that is named Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, but you would probably know it best as RTI. 0.5 literacy coordinator, so reducing our full-time literacy coordinator to 0.5, reducing our full-time preschool coordinator to 0.5. That would make it not possible for that person to do child outreach and kindergarten registration, which are 2 vendor pieces of work that we had put under that umbrella when the position was full-time. So there is an offset there, and then a CNA that is not needed this year for to attend to a child. Next. In the teachers union, so NEASK teachers, $2 million reduction, a net of 19.7 FTEs, because we are at an enrollment where it is now possible to go to split teams at Curtis Corner and Broad Rock. We're taking a 0.5 preschool teacher reduction, a reduction of the social emotional learning coach, 0.2 elementary librarian, 2 high school teachers. There's two grade 2s. There's 2 grade 3s at Wakefield School and 3 grade 4s, so we're able to take a reduction there. But we need to add a 5th grade teacher. So I just wanted to show that to you, that enrollment is dictating a loss at Wakefield in grade 4, but we're anticipating the need for an additional grade 5 at Broad Rock. 2 academic coaches, literacy and technology, elementary health, which was added last year. We have 1 ESL teacher at the high school, 1 at each middle school, and instead of having 3, we've reduced that to 2, so someone will be shared among buildings. 1.5 teachers to be determined after children pick their coursework, and 2.5 special educators, so 19.7 in this group. In the SKESP group, which is the support staff group of teacher assistants and clerical staff and secretaries and administrative secretaries, the school committee had voted in November. They had a choice between moving the ITA from URI to our high school, and that they chose to keep the ITA at URI as the public had encouraged. And that necessitated a reduction of 1.5 teacher assistant job coaches. We reduced 4 clerks. .5 preschool teacher assistant that would normally accompany the preschool teacher, 3 additional teacher assistants, and then a van driver. We were unable to find a driver for our van, so we donated our van to the Johnny Cake Center, so we are not at this point in need of a van driver. That is a total reduction to this group of 10 FTEs. And that was a typo from yesterday, just for the school committee's knowledge. It was 9.5. We had forgotten to transpose the .5 preschool TA. That was on the original documents. Next. And then the school committee asked us to write down a lot of the positions that were discussed, like what might happen beyond the 2.5% if we're not able to settle on the 2.5% property tax transfer, to give you a sense of the very difficult conversations that were had at the school committee table. We did not choose, the school committee did not choose to reduce the Broad Rock assistant principal. They kept 0.5 of a literacy director. They didn't reduce in guidance. The family community engagement teacher, music, custodians, elementary Spanish teacher that was really championed by so many of our elementary families. 2 additional high school teachers because of the impact it would have on the block schedule, clerks at the other schools, the other technology coach, additional teacher assistants, which really came out as one of the top priorities. Student assistants, counselors, they are a vendor, but they, they were there this weekend, and they really do a lot to support our kids. High school and middle school, summer school, and their supplies. And so those were the things that were also very precious to us that we wrestled with over the last couple of months. And that's all that I have for you in terms of, we're happy to go back to whichever slide you'd like to if you need that, or we're happy to entertain any questions.
Now, that last slide, if all those are cut, does that get to the 1%, or is that just some of the other?
So there were lots of discussions, and we were not asked to prioritize or come up with a list that would get to the 1%. So those are the items that we could do a little back of the envelope math, but those would be the next areas until we came to the 1%.
Abel, I just want to clarify, these are sort of the recommendations from the superintendent. So if it were to be, down to the 1%, there are certainly things on here that the committee is likely to say, can't go. And so I want to be kind of forward here. And if the town council decides that they're going to, accept Rob's recommendation of a 1% property tax transfer to the schools, I've been through this process several times. I'm pretty well versed in our budget. I think what'll ultimately happen is that for the first time in a really long time, the town of South Kingstown will essentially be deciding that they can no longer afford to have sports and music programs in their public schools. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. So these are some of the recommendations, but having been through this several times and sort of taking the temperature of the committee, that's kind of where I see us being.
I think that the way the math worked, can you hear me? Okay. I want to say it was going to be an additional $400,000 to get to 1% from this. And so, was it around 400,000? Yeah, 720. Okay. So we haven't really prioritized those things because, quite honestly, even to get to 2.5, we were stunned in our seats because we felt we were no longer beyond that point meeting our mission to support the mission of the school district, because we were then making cuts into, for example, this past weekend, the student assistance counselors that were at the high school all weekend to be there to support students in real life situations. Like, we could not, in good conscience, cut those things and say that we are, in fact, supporting the development of these children for college and career and beyond. summer school. It really directly impacts our graduation rate, and that's sustainable quality of life for our community to have a strong graduation rate. And we got to a point where we were like, anything beyond this, we are putting our learners in survival mode, and that's not where we want them to be.
And then the other question I had is, so the $90,000 less that we're getting from the state, is that accounted for in this? Yes. Okay. Questions from the council about these slides?
So I have a question. When we last met, we asked you to show us a budget with a 1% property tax transfer increase, and I'm guessing we're not going to see that. Is that the truth? We don't have that, correct?
Are there additional slides that would show that by any chance?
I was asked to show this. We went over this last night,
Okay.
and this is the information that that the school committee is providing to you this evening.
I'm disturbed by that. I don't think it was unclear when you left here last what we asked to see, and I think we should have seen that tonight. And then we could have gone further. You could have shown us this as well, but to totally disregard what the council asked for, I think is, I don't know, just not, we're not engaging on the right level, I guess. So that's my comment.
So I think you can imagine the final slide there that Kristen has.
I don't want to imagine, Alicia. I want to see it.
So I think you can visually see the slide too. This is what it's going to take to get us to 1%. And beyond that, we are likely going to have to cut our sports and music programs.
So I guess the first thing when I hear sports and other programs, I guess what I get afraid of is throwing out things like that that are very emotionally charged, and whether or not there are other things that you could potentially cut. I do agree with Deb that the direction of the council at our last work session was for a 1% pro forma, so we could see it, and we didn't even get close to that. The other thing that I realized at our work session last time was that I had a big concern regarding the fact that I felt that young teachers were going to get laid off, or ones that just started out in the profession based on seniority. But what I found out at that meeting is that we only hire top step teachers in the district, which was a decision made by, I guess, previous school committees. But I do also feel that young teachers deserve a chance as well. And you can go ahead, sure.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's a misnomer. So our personnel assignment team policy hires the best person for the job. And so we do have many top step teachers, as do many other school departments in the state. If you've worked in the system for 10 years, you are earning at the top step. And so we did a review, and that was a part of our budget discussion, of over the last several years, I'm not remembering how many, but more than 2. What is our average teacher step? And it's 5 or 6. Okay. So we are hiring first step teachers. We're hiring top step teachers. If we have a subject like a hard to fill subject, we may only have 1 or 2 applicants, and they may both be top step teachers. But in other subjects, we would have plenty of candidates to choose from, and our school-based teams would select 2 people. So let's say Rory and Joe, and they're both equally qualified, and we're going to pick you. Okay, so so they're equally qualified, and that's the recommendation that comes to the principal and to myself. We felt either one would be a great match for our school or department, and then let's say Rory is at top step and Joe is at first step. Then we pick Joe. We had to have it work out that way for you, Joe, right? So we picked Joe because if they're equally qualified, then certainly we want to save the community money. But if they're widely varied, then, you would want the very best candidate for your children. And we've had discussions. There is a difference of opinion amongst the school committee on that, and whatever they decide, we will honor, whether it be, the best qualified person or changing our personnel assignment team policy to hire the most novice. We work at their direction, but our policy doesn't right now say hire top step.
Okay.
It allows us to if that's the best.
I apologize if I
It's okay.
misunderstood it, but
You
that's
weren't
how
the only one that
I
had the misconception.
understood it when it was communicated last time.
Mr. President, if I may, just a clarification on that, Kristen. When you say the average is 5 or 6, that's the average at which you're hiring, not the average on the payroll. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the average on the payroll is closer to 10, yeah.
98%.
Right.
And how long does it take to get to top step? 10 years, you said? 10 years. And then the other concern I had that one of the community members had brought up in the past was the number of total employees per student. I think we were at 6 students per employee. And when you compared that to some of the other communities, they were higher. So just throwing that out there, looking for ways to be more efficient, but making sure that the students and the teachers get what they need, and also that we continue and strive to be the best school district around.
So just a quick rebuttal of mentioning that, the sports and the music programs are kind of emotional. I will tell you that we have demolished what was a remarkable special education program in South Kingstown and an inclusionary preschool program. We have been cutting and cutting and cutting the supports for our most vulnerable learners. And you're right, it's not something that gets on the front of the paper. Most of these families that are relying on these supports for their children, their lives are so stressful, they're not going to come out to a public meeting and complain or whatever it is, right? So we've gotten through all of those things. We are at the point of cutting music and sports programs. This isn't sensationalistic. You might be used to that from former school committees. That's where we're at now. Okay? It's hard. It's a tough conversation that we're having as a town, but this is something that we're deciding together,
I understand that, but I guess the other concern is that we're at this table every year, so I think we need to figure out a way. My opinion is I think we're kind of at almost a breaking point at this point, and we need to figure out a way to plan better for the future for our students, for our taxpayers, and to make sure that we have the money set aside and that we can manage it well. And I know it's difficult, but I think it could be done, but it's something that we're going to have to work together at.
I really agree with you on that.
So I would like to go back to Mr. DeCruz's remarks and then Mr. Zanetsky's response on Dr. Stringfellow said that our average teacher hire is a 5th or 6th step teacher, but as Mr. Zarnetsky pointed out, our average step of the teachers currently teaching in the district is the 10th step. So I think the community needs to understand how that works. Up until almost 10 years ago, I think it was 2010 or 11, that the pension system was changed. And prior to that, teachers could teach for 28 years. So that would put them at about 50 years old and could retire with a certain percentage of a pension. And so there was, and if you went to 35 years, you were what was considered fully vested, and then your pension maxed out, still at a percentage. That's no longer the case. So I'm going to tell you, I'm a mathematician. I can't figure out how the pension works, and I'm just glad I'm not still in it, to be honest with you. But there's a formula that that relates, that matches the age of the person and the number of years they've been teaching. So in a lot of cases, teachers are staying with us longer, where in the past years you could almost predict, well, we have this number of teachers who are over the 30-year mark and they'll start to retire. That's no longer the case because teachers have to teach considerably longer. You know, in some cases, into their late 60s. And so I think that, yes, our teachers are averaged out at the top step. But also the fact that they come here and stay here. They don't come here as a stepping stone and go to another district, have us go through the professional development and the training that's necessary to get a teacher well versed in the different programs that we teach, depending on what the teacher is teaching. They stay here because this is a good place to teach. So I think a lot of that needs to be considered also.
So just an observation. So this is my 5th budget. Since my first budget, we're down approximately 400 students. And if the 2.5% property tax transfer increase goes through, we're, I think, about $5 million more in spending than 5 years ago. So I think, and then here's what I notice every year. Wherever we land this year, that's the starting point next year. So we're at, if 2.5% goes through, we're at $62.5 million or in that area starting next year. And my fear is that this same conversation happens again next year. So, and I asked this question, I think, last year or the year before, but at what point, we're fairly certain enrollment's going to continue to drop. So at what point in enrollment drop do you actually see the next year's spending decrease? And I know there's a number there because I can't believe we're going to spend $62.5 million on 1,000 students. So the number's somewhere, and we need to solve this dilemma. When you have that dramatic of an enrollment drop, and then I think an 8 or 9% increase in spending with an enrollment drop like that, there's some structural problem here, I think, that I don't see that I think needs to be solved.
So I would like to point out, Mr. Veely, that the data that I have in front of me, and I'd be more than happy to share it with you, since 2008, we have had a 17% decrease in our enrollment, 17.1%. Since 2008, we've had a 17.8% decrease in employees.
Yep, I've seen, we saw that back in December.
Mr. President, just a question on that, though. Can you, what's the ratio of staff to students in those two periods? Because my guess is that while the percentages are going down, because you're dealing with different starting numbers, the ratio has changed, and you actually have a higher staff to student ratio at this point.
And while you're looking for that, Michelle, here's my only point. You can be down 10% in enrollment and down 20% in staff. This isn't working. This is a perennial problem.
So I work with schools during my normal job, and the subject...
This is normal.
This is normal. And the subject of budgeting comes up a lot, and what their budget cycle is, and when they make determinations on what they're going to invest in. And quite often, I actually will talk to districts that say they begin that process early summer. And I think that's really our problem. I think we have gotten into this habit of this is our budget strategy, is to wait too long, and then it's so painful that we come out of it and we lick our wounds, and we're we just never even want to, I don't even want to think about this. I'm going to just retreat and hit the fetal position for a month. That's not sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not functional. Something that we had talked about within the committee and with Dr. Stringfellow was, instead of, like you said, starting with this next year and then wiggling our way out of it, is this summer, as part of our retreat, basically doing a ground-up budget, saying, this is how many students you have, this is how many buildings you have, these are the programs that support your strategic plan. Build your budget. What does that look like? Instead, and not letting reality impact it, but really build the budget for what it should look like to support the number of students you have and to support the programs that support your strategic plan. Build it from there, and then we have a handful of months to figure out how we can actually get there. I think that's a sustainable, healthy way to look at a budget, and I don't think we've done that in the past, but it's something we're openly addressing. That really, to me, is the problem. I agree with you, that we don't spend enough time in preparation, and then it's this frantic kind of guilt trip. It gets down to the wire, and you guys have to be the bad guys every year, oh, you're not going to fund the schools, you're not going to fund the schools, you don't care about the kids. Well, you didn't have very much time to really digest what this was going to look like, nor did we. So I agree with you, it's a problem.
I think in part, too, it becomes more expensive to educate students. The municipal budget grew by 6%, I think, right? And most of that is tied up in salaries.
And benefits.
Yeah, and so to run our school district, it's we are laying people off every year. We're laying several teachers off. And I'm sort of losing my train of thought, but it's not like less students equals less cost to educate. That's not how it works. It's increasing all over the U.S. It's not just Rhode Island. It's not just South Kingstown. We're seeing all of New England is seeing decline in student populations with an increase in the expense to educate students. We're taking Curtis Corner Middle School offline. We're doing things that will have a positive impact on our budget. But that's the reality, regardless of when we start our budgeting process. I think it is going to continue to increase annually.
So that number is identical.
The ratios are?
The ratios are, they're off by 0.02.
So it's a little higher staff to student than it was.
No.
So you start with a 485-person
No, those numbers are 6.1 for both, for 2008 and for 2018-19. 2008-9, 2018-19.
It's 6 to 1?
It's 6.1 students per full-time employee. That includes, those full-time employees, of course, include our maintenance people and our office staff and other people that, it's not teacher to student ratio, in other words. And to continue what Ms. Collins said, not just our employee, salaries and benefits, but as all of us have experienced in our lives, everything is going up. The cost to heat our buildings, the cost to provide electricity in our buildings. So I think it's, to be honest with you, Mr. Veely, I think it's misleading to say, it's not like we're coming to the council looking for more money every year to provide frills for our kids.
Oh, I didn't
No, I know
imply that at all.
I know you didn't say that, but why is it going up? I mean, I don't have it in front of me, but I know that I could get it if we compared electric bills for the last few years, if we compared heating bills for the last few years, if we compared supplies that we need to buy. All of those things are going up. And the fact that we've reduced our staffing by a number that's absolutely equal to the number of not the number, but the ratios of students. We've reduced our staffing by an absolutely equal amount. In fact, our students, it's minus 17.1%, and our staffing, it's minus 17.8%. So, I'm a taxpayer too. I'm a senior citizen taxpayer. This hurts me too, but I want to see the youngsters in our district get the same kind of an education that my kids got over 10 years ago. I want to see that continue. I don't want to cut our educational programs. Every cut that we made.
Michelle, everybody gets that, and I agree with you. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants a good education for the students. I'll take a little bit different angle. So cost per pupil is higher than similar districts. So I think North Kingstown and Portsmouth are like 18,000, and we're approaching 21.
And we have, I don't have the transportation budgets for North Kingstown and Portsmouth, but we have an outrageous transportation budget. And when the state created the funding formula, I can't, in my wildest dreams, call it the fair funding formula, which is what it's called. There was a lot of discussion at the State House about transportation in, transportation out. And they left transportation out of the figuring. I think we have one of the highest transportation budgets. I go to Rhode Island Association of School Committee meetings all the time. And during this budget season, we talk with one another about this. You should have seen the look on the faces of the East Bay school committee members, Tiverton, Portsmouth, Newport, when I said 2 years ago our transportation budget was $4.1 million. They were like, no, that's not for transportation. That must include something else. I said, no, it doesn't. That's our transportation budget. And, that's because of the landmass, which we all love, but it's a reality.
I get it. That is a big number, but it's not the only reason. It can't be the $4 million compared to $2 million.
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Mrs. Crawford, what's our transportation budget now?
It's here.
Yeah, $4,170,000.
It's about the same this year. We eliminated some after-school buses and some other transportation costs as we went through the budgeting process this year. Keep in mind, we will, instead of doing 4 days a week for the after-school program, we did cut that down also.
And just as a point of information for the council, it is, without a doubt, the biggest chunk of the school department's operating budget. If you take out personnel, transportation is eating everything else. It is a huge cost.
So
the rest of the operating budget for the school program is $3 million. It's not extraordinary.
And there are districts in the state that don't transport their high school students. They buy them a RIPTA bus pass, which is way less expensive than running a bus.
It is clearly the case that the expensive items are transportation and staff. That's right. That's where it is.
So, regarding the transportation budget, we have I think a number of buses that are not full or anywhere near full. Is there a way to solve that? Is there a way to offer an incentive, or I think of it in the reverse way. So a bus seat, and I know someone's going to tell me that you can't do this because I'm sure RIDE won't let you. A bus seat is $20 a year. And if you don't need it, It doesn't, I know. They're not going to let you do it.
Yeah, that's-
I know they're not going to let you do it.
My wheelhouse now, Liz.
Is there another innovative way to either
That is literally the million-dollar question.
fill the buses by using less of them?
So if you were living in Seekonk, Massachusetts, my best friend lives in Seekonk, Massachusetts. She has 4 children that ride 4 different buses, and she has to make a decision: is she going to transport them,
Right.
or does she pay the community of Seekonk to transport them? We don't have that option in Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, you can't pay to play sports.
Yep.
You can't pay to go to summer school. You can't pay for transportation. And there are rules about what the, like walking distance and ride times and the large demographics and Warden's Pond and, people living farther away from their neighborhood school all come into play there in terms of the amount of time they're on buses. We have done innovative, we have a transportation subcommittee. We were the only group in the state to try to launch robotic bus monitors to pilot it for the rest of the state, and they ended up not working. We didn't ever put any children at risk. We ran with bus monitors while piloting this for a national company that was thinking outside the box. We decided to have parents opt out because we constantly hear, my kid's bus is half full. Why can't I get a seat on that bus? I'd rather be on his bus than his bus than his bus. And why doesn't that work? And so we try to fix that. But the problem is that even if you decide now forevermore, I'm going to drive my kid to school every single day, we cannot give up your spot on that bus without your written permission. So we said, okay, we'll send a survey home. Would you give up your spot? Certainly there are juniors and seniors that are driving to school every day, and even if their car breaks down, they're going to take a ride with their friend or neighbor. They're likely not going to get on the bus. As a mother of 4 previous teenage drivers, they would not go back on the bus. So, but we have been, parents get nervous about saying, well, I don't know what my circumstance is going to be. Maybe my job will change. Maybe we'll have to move. Maybe something will happen. And we've tried that several years, and it has been a flop. It has worked in other districts, so other people have stole my idea and they get it to work for some reason, but we have not been successful doing that. If you have any transportation ideas, we'll take them.
Yeah, so what you're telling me, and I believe you, I don't doubt this, is that your most expensive operational cost outside of salaries is you cannot run it efficiently. The system won't let you run it efficiently.
Run transportation
Right.
efficiently, correct.
Can you do the reverse of charging for the seat and give a bonus if you don't take it?
So pay people to not ride?
If they don't want the bus, they get $50.
Can you front us the money? No, I'm kidding.
Well, you're going to save the money in less buses.
So the issue there would be figuring out how to do that while maintaining your obligation under your contracts.
Right. No,
If we could figure out how to maintain the contract obligation and at the same time incentivize not riding, that might actually be worth exploring.
I mean,
How long is the bus contract for?
We do have the transportation subcommittee. We are looking at the policy. Marianne we're going over the policy now. It's not something that will be put into effect for September, that's for sure. And we do have our committee members who we meet with our legislators. I know Rep. Fogarty, and I'm sure McAtee is also up there. They go every year to say, hey, when the funding formula is coming up again, we need transportation factored in a different manner. So I don't know if you want to speak.
I think it
to that
would be
anymore.
better to run it more efficiently than to
Agreed,
get a
but
reimbursement.
we're trying.
But figure out. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk.
No, it's all right. It is one of the most frustrating components of our budget, and we've been trying to deal with it for an extended period of time. Not saying that we shouldn't still continue, but just it's certainly not without it's $4 million.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, if I were approaching it, figure out what the seat's worth, what it's costing you. If it's costing you $200 a year, offer a parent $100 not to take it, and before you know it, you've got less buses. Because they'll jump at cash.
And then you put your kid on the bus.
No, I don't. I never put my kid on the bus.
And I don't know what the numbers are.
I think it's an interesting thought, Joe, but there's a lot of things that would have to go into thinking about that. I think a lot of people who don't take the bus already are going to get paid $200.
I didn't think we'd solve it tonight.
Thank you. A lot of
Mr. Veely, the Transportation Subcommittee is looking for community members to join, and so I think that you should become a community member on the Transportation Subcommittee.
I have one night left. Okay. That's a night. No.
I think it would be interesting to see that figure, per pupil expenditures on transportation, SK, comparatively to some of those other districts that people compare us to when they're saying we have such high per pupil expenditures.
What we've put up on the screen here is a table that Trish has put together, and I think it's an excellent summary of the challenge facing the council going forward. The first two columns describe the last 2 years, just sort of as a historic reference point. The third column is the proposed administration town manager's budget, which puts us at a tax levy increase of 3.13%. If we were to go to 1.5% and change nothing else in the budget, we are over the state levy cap. At 1.5%, we are over the state levy cap. We cannot go to 1.5% property tax transfer without offsets. We're going to have to cut something somewhere to get to 1.5%. When you go to 2%, we have to cut nearly 1.5% somewhere else, and when we get to 2.5, we've got to cut 2.38%. This is the challenge going forward. It's not that we don't want to give money to the schools in the school program. There just isn't. We literally cannot tax our way out of it because the state cap does not allow us to do that.
The other thing that I noticed at one of our last budget meetings, I think it might have been the last one that we had at the council last Wednesday, that was disturbing to me was the fact that we need a second EMS vehicle staffed for overnight. We're relying too much on our neighboring towns at that point. And for me, if we're relying on neighboring towns, that's going to increase the response time. And we owe it to our citizens in order to be able to make sure that we can pay for things like that. But at this point, even something like that is not in our budget. The other thing that I think is important, there's a lot of speeding in our town, and we can't afford to add one traffic police officer at this point. And we're only talking like $97,000 for that one police officer. So we are really looking at the numbers really hard. It's not that we're not trying, but like the manager said, the numbers currently are the numbers. I mean, if we increase by a certain amount, I think we're going to put ourselves in jeopardy as a town.
This slide describes the three exceptions to the property tax levy cap. This is a procedure the state's put in place for municipalities that have extraordinary circumstances that require exceeding the 4% cap. You can apply to the state for relief from the cap if you've had high debt service. We simply do not have that problem, although we are setting $500,000 aside for future debt that we're anticipating. We're not struggling with debt service. This is not a situation where we can't pay our bills, so we need to go higher. This is basically the save the banks provision in the state law. It's if a municipality is in jeopardy of not being able to pay its creditors, you can seek a higher levy. We're not in that situation. Substantial growth. You can exceed the 4% cap if you've had so much growth, so much development in your town that just taxing the new property causes you to go over the 4%. At that point, they're not driving everyone else's taxes down just because you have a temporary blip because of growth. We have not had growth that would justify going to the state and asking for this type of relief.
Could you go back to the slide, the last slide? Just looking at it, the math is not making sense to me right now. So a 1% increase in the tax cap, raised at 540,000. So 0.5% above that should only be another 250,000.
270,000, and the levy is only on the non-fixed portion of the tax roll, not the motor vehicle portion.
So 250,000, I understand, or 275, but 275 plus 75,916,000 should only get you to 76,100,000, and it's 76,700,000 up there. So I just...
You have to factor in your overlay, so your uncollectibles, so you're never going to raise 100%. So that is about
That's way more than the...
1.3%.
Which is 1,003,904. That's the uncollectible
98.7%.
And that is consistent with prior years, so we can check it against prior.
Are you following my math, though? 1% increase is a $540,000 increase in the budget. So another 0.5 on top of that would be another $250,000. That's showing an $800,000 increase rather than $250,000. I doubt there's anything that accounts for that extra $550,000. All right.
We'll run some math. So
I'm sure those numbers are not correct, is what I'm saying.
I actually have a little bit of information if we want to return back to the transportation discussion just for context. In North Kingstown, so I looked up, I actually have this in a budget analysis spreadsheet that I had done. North Kingstown, Portsmouth, and Barrington were ones that I looked up just because for academic performance aspirational reasons, for profile of community and student enrollment. In North Kingstown, average daily enrollment is 3,972, so more students than we have, and their transportation budget is $1.37 million. Barrington has 3,337 students average daily, and their transportation budget is $1.2 million. So, for example, in North Kingstown, that's a difference in just under $700 per student. And when you look at the cost per pupil, so it's very significant, and it's a needle that we're trying our best to move with support at the State House. It's tough. We just have to bark louder and more strategically. So, just wanted to add that.
So, Mr. President, eagle-eyed as you are, we have found the error. It was an error in the carrying of general funds. So we're going to put the new numbers up, and they are better. They're not great.
So is it fair... Is it fair to say that since the facilities process has been sort of slowed down, and we're looking at November for sort of shoring up our stage 2 application, would you say that that $500,000 that's put aside for the debt relief could be pushed out a year?
So, yeah, we've had a little discussion about that. It's like Rob is busy with some math. I think the presumption from the council is that the project is going to move ahead, perhaps delayed by the 6 months. And it makes sense for the town's debt service plans to still plan to have that $500,000 set aside in this year's budget. It was going to be a stretch if the project moved ahead as we were originally planning. Rob can perhaps explain the...
I'm sorry.
We're talking about delaying the set-aside of $500,000 for the debt service.
So Trish has a slide that probably speaks to that as well as anything else. The challenge with trying to set aside the money that we're intending to put toward debt service is the reason that we're doing the early set-aside is so that we can offset the increase in taxes that comes as we have to start actually dealing with the debt service. The problem is we've got to load it fairly quick because of construction timeframes. So there's going to be a big hit. We're going to have to go out in 2 years and lay $75 million worth of bonded debt on the market. Even with the $500,000, we end up with a deficit in our reserves for debt service in 2024. And that's a significant deficit. It's $900,000 worth of deficit in 2024. So not having $500,000 set aside early means we've either got to catch up during a shorter period of time, or we're going to be $1.4 million in deficit in 2024. That's the challenge.
That makes sense. Thanks.
So these are the new numbers, and yay, it keeps us under 4 all the way out to 2% property tax increase. But getting to 2.5, we're still looking at about $200,000 worth of reductions somewhere in the budget. So this is actually much better.
Good job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
We're sorry.
SK educated, you know?
We
So, any other questions from council members about the presentation from the schools? I think we've heard that, we wanted to see the numbers at 1% and what those cuts look like. And I think we have some idea. I think it's the first we've heard of potential cuts to music, sports, and, I don't think this town is a town that would consider doing that to its students. So, I'd like to hear more conversation around that, because I don't feel like I think there's still a desire on the council side thinking about this 1%, and I think the reality of 1% is not real to us yet.
I can only speak for one person up here. At this moment in time, cutting of sports and music would not be something that I would fight that amongst my committee members. That would not be something that I would ever propose to come to the town council with. I'd be remiss to not say that I would look at our facilities again before I would even think about going down that path.
That's irrelevant for this year. The facilities sort of presumption that we could save any money by closing Wakefield School for this year or next year.
I don't recall naming a facility. I said I would look at our facilities again. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm not pinpointing a facility. I'm discussing the fact that before I would even think about bringing music and sports up to the town council to say, these have got to go, we have no other option, there are other options.
And I think she is probably a minority on the committee. I think that is where we are.
But you said it was a moot point, I guess. That's kind of concerning. I know.
No, I think that for this budget, we're not going to close Curtis Corner for next year. Okay. So I do think looking at our facilities for this year, that is a moot point.
Yeah, but I guess we're going back to when we started. Was it a couple years ago when we started looking at hiring a consultant? Was it 2 years ago? And I think one of the reasons last year the council was willing to go as high as we did is we felt like the school committee was working towards a long-term plan. And I think some of us have felt concerned that we kind of didn't really get any cost savings, but I don't know if that's because there isn't any, but my feeling is that we could find some, but it's kind of difficult at the same time for a number of reasons. And then the other thing that I was thinking about, and again, just thinking outside of the box, because I think during that whole process, I was probably the only one that suggested going with option D at the council level back then. But also, at the same time, my thought process was that we should build a new high school, so it's both, that's expensive as well, I get that. But one of the thoughts I had the other day was, and I'm just throwing it out there because I'm, off the crazy train sometimes, but the regionalization of, say, our high school with Narragansett, those are two very good high schools that have a lot of things going for them. Narragansett with their athletic fields, us with our field house, rec center. Both are struggling with enrollment. So just thoughts, that I'm just throwing out there that maybe there are things that we haven't considered or looked at. Like everyone else, I think we were disappointed that the Stage 2 application got pushed. But I think it is what it is at this point, and it's going to give us an opportunity to hopefully make sure that we get this right and not feel rushed to meet a deadline. And lastly, the only other question I had was what our special ed caseloads are versus state averages, if you have that.
I can get that to you. The special ed director was at our meeting last night and could speak to ours, but not compared to others, so I'll get that to you.
So I heard, potential sports and music, potential close another school. As I remember, the savings with closing a single school were not that substantial, to be honest. So perhaps a mixture even of those things. I am deeply troubled, I will say, even, with the $400,000 or so of identified cuts, that there's 11 more TAs listed there. Those are the backbone of the special education program, from my point of view, and I think, the cuts there have already been catastrophic.
Right.
And certainly those are students who need services. I would not like to see those further cuts made to the program.
Sorry, just one other thought. Michelle, you mentioned we were talking about the 6-to-1 ratio going back from 2008 to 2018. One of the thoughts I had when, because I've seen some other numbers for some other districts that are similar, and one of the ones that stood out, I think, was Barrington, and I think they're at an 8-to-1 as an example. So do you think it's possible that even as far back as 08, 07, that we've been running at a high ratio, and it's just carried over?
I think before we can answer that question, we need to compare demographics between the two districts. I don't think that you can just look at an 8-to-1 ratio in Barrington and a 6-to-1 ratio in South Kingstown and look at it at the surface. I think you need to look more deeply into demographics before you can make that.
They don't have, they have a pretty abnormal distribution in their student population of students that need extra support services. Wouldn't you say, in Barrington?
Abnormal.
No, they have a much lower, their distribution of students their student profile is just different. We'll just say that.
We had a community member, Mr. Lick, come forward and say something rather profound that I've been stuck on. You can't compare one community to another community unless you're unpacking each of the differences. So transportation is one piece, poverty is another piece, how far apart the schools are, the demographics of the families, of the educators, of the program, of the curriculum. It's a lot to unpack. It's easy to just say, transportation is probably the easiest comparison because it's largely around land mass because we have the same state law. But the other pieces of it are some local dear pieces that differ from community to community. I've worked in 3 different communities, and what is dear to one and what works to educate students in one doesn't necessarily work to educate students in another. So I think it's tricky to start just comparing. I know that there have been detailed, I'm not presuming it's just a topical surface comparison, but it's difficult to compare. Even neighboring communities, we're constantly compared to Charahoe and to Narragansett when our entire staffing and educational programs and outcomes are different, and our students are different. And so they're people, and they're very unique, and we design programs that are very successful in supporting them, and it's hard to compare, I guess, is my bottom line.
We did look at the possibility of early closure of Curtis Corner, for example, to see if we could recognize those savings sooner. And, the feedback from the community was that they wanted time to digest a plan for where their kids were going to be next year, and they weren't comfortable with the idea of, mobile classrooms, I think was the friendly term that we landed on for that, and people just weren't comfortable with it. And so we had identified what those savings were going to be. I think it was going to be like 800,000, something like that. Mm-hmm. And we were very upfront with the community that was the potential savings, and they were very clear with us that it wasn't worth it to them.
In terms of the busing, I think one community to look at would be maybe Coventry, because they have similar landmass. I know you live in Coventry.
A little bit familiar with Coventry. Yeah. We've looked at Coventry's numbers, but we'll continue to do that.
Right. Very, very close. Sometimes they say they're bigger than us. Sometimes we say they're bigger than them. Yeah.
Lake Tioga.
Right. The other question I had is, how many children have we lost this year in terms of students? And then where do we stand with registration for kindergarten currently?
How many children we've lost?
Like, meaning not lost.
Attrition?
Like with the attrition?
It's the first day of this.
Yeah, so if you take whatever we had at the beginning of the year for students, are we down, are we up? Or
so we have, we'll look at that. We did look at that, but I don't have it in front of me. There's not much difference since the beginning of the school year. What was a difference is last year's predictions of how many children would leave us to go to career and technical center education programs, and you saw us early on. We over budgeted for that, and we still under predicted how many children were leaving because there was a new a tactic, for lack of a better word, to start the programs in 9th grade. So more students left us this year than before, so you saw us take money out of our undesignated fund balance in the fall to the tune of about $300,000 to offset some of that. And so we've had to, we're doing a very good job with our own programs. Students are leaving us for other reasons, like they're going to Narragansett. Many are saying, I want to go to a smaller school. There's nothing we can do necessarily to compete with, I want to go to a smaller school. In the exit or entrance interviews to go to Charahoe, students are saying, I want a career and tech center. We can do cartwheels. We're not going to create a center. There are only 5 or 6 centers in the state. And so we have 6 approved CTE programs now. We are planning, we're looking at those early numbers. It looks like we have, we're holding a lot of our own kids in those programs for next year, and we have about 2 students projected to be tuitioning in who have completed applications. In terms of kindergarten enrollment, I think it was either 153 or 158 that we're at that are fully registered for next year.
Okay, thank you. The other thing was in terms of, I can't even remember what I was going to say now, but it had to do with the number of kids that were leaving before they came into high school. So there's a new law, right, that allowed them to, I don't know if it's a new law, but they were leaving, like, say, in 8th grade without even considering the high school, right? Some of them. Okay, and I think one of the other things we have to also be cognitive of is, I think, some kids one of the conversations I had with the principal one day, I think in a meeting that we were sitting down together with, was kids will like kind of drive by the high school the way it looks, kind of scary a little bit. But once you get them in, so I think trying to get kids to at least come and experience the high school before they make that decision would be imperative.
So we, years ago, we never had a sort of a open house for kids who were exploring different programs. So we started that probably 5 years ago. We had our first open house, very similar to the private schools, even before we had career and technical opportunities. And in addition to going to our department chair and our high school principal every year go to Curtis Corner to speak to the families about our program offerings, and our open house early for students has been very, very successful. I mean, Kate attended it again this year. We have lots of kids that come through. We have lots of our students and faculty are volunteering to go for the day to showcase our clubs and our after-school programs, as well as our during-the-day programs and our curricula. And so they're very, very excited. We have done that. We've done marketing. I think you've heard Mr. Mezzanotte say he had no idea that when he was going to principal school that he would be the chief marketing executive for the high school. So the school committee has started a marketing subcommittee, and they're thinking of every way possible to be able to not only keep our children that were born in South Kingstown and live in South Kingstown attending our schools, but also drawing some other kids in. And so, yeah.
Kristen, I have a question about the kindergarten enrollment. How does that compare to previous years?
So we're very closely. Let me pull it up while talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, and then I'll address Stephanie. I appreciate and respect that the parents didn't like that original plan or the first blush plan, but we have to consider all the community members, and I'm sure you guys respect the taxpayers as much as we do. But it's something that is always on the front of our mind. That I appreciate it and respect it, but I have to appreciate and respect the whole community. So sometimes things are tough, but I
Can you
can't.
say something, Rob?
Actually, I was just looking for the comparison to prior years on the enrollment.
Insert the Jeopardy theme here.
So no need. So we have 158 students registered for kindergarten, and at this time last year there were 170. 201 was our official October 1st enrollment. The year before that, at this time, we had 181, and 204 was the official October enrollment. And in 2016-17, we didn't collect data as of March 1st, but 185 was our official K enrollment number.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other comments up here at the table before we move on to public comment? All right, very good. So you've heard this difficult discussion up here. I just ask that it's a full room, so we're going to try and keep time on folks. I'll give people 5 minutes. That's our habit here in the town council. And try just keep it directed at us. No ad hominem attacks. We don't really need applause, any of that stuff. It's really just public comment. Try to have input on the budget process and let us know what you're thinking. State your name for the record if I didn't already say that. It's first come, first served, too.
I'm Carol Linder, and I have the privilege of being the director of the SMILE program, which started exactly 25 years ago in South Kingstown at Curtis Corner. And I'm here to advocate for putting that back into your budget, and the reason being that if this year is any indication, while some numbers go down, SMILE numbers go up. We are oversubscribed at Peacedale Elementary, at Curtis Corner Broad Rock, and at the high school. So instead of having 60 kids, we probably have about 75. If you're in SMILE, you are most likely a minority, an educationally disadvantaged person, and always a female who seems to get it that it's cool to be smart. So that we have a whole contingent of kids who are basically a pipeline from elementary through middle, through high school, on to higher education. It's our pleasure this year probably to give at least one of your students a SMILE scholarship of $500 to whatever college or higher ed institution they want to go. What I know is that SMILE is one of these STEM programs that has more than ever accomplished what I thought it could set out to do. Kids know it is cool to be smart, and they are very much a peer group that I think in your town, in our town, since I taught in this town for 35 years, that it's a kind of program that you wished you had been in when you were a little person. And I think that there are parents that call me and thank me that we have this program and want to know, couldn't we have a second elementary program? And it's always finances, of course. And I do empathize with transportation costs, since I sometimes think I'm fundraising for the bus companies throughout the state. We take kids to the University of Rhode Island on overnights so that they can do an engineering challenge and also see what it's like to be at a major university, to see kids who look like them, and then aspire to be that college student. It's not inexpensive by any means, and we definitely look for ways to raise that money. And I appreciate that we have dedicated SMILE teachers, some of whom are in this audience right now, who give their time for a very small stipend to make sure that your children stay motivated to do well in school, to enjoy science, technology, engineering, and math. And I think that the investment that the South Kingstown makes is probably around $17,000, and I match it with about $43,000. And I think it's a particularly good match as far as I'm concerned, because if your child is in SMILE and does 1 full year of SMILE minimum, that child has a 90 to 100% chance of graduating high school. So there's your high school graduation rate going up. And then the second point is usually 54% of the high school graduates immediately enter college. What we're trying to figure out right now is what's the percentage for every school district, and we're in 7 school districts in Rhode Island. What's the percentage of college graduation? What's the percentage of graduate school graduation? Because these kids are making us proud, and many of them stay in Rhode Island, and a lot of them are doing the kinds of science, technology, engineering, and math, whether it be at a hospital as an MD, as a person at Schneider Electric, at Toray Plastics, and I can't imagine somebody saying, well, let's see, she's kicking in $43,000 and we have to kick in about 17. That doesn't seem like it's such a bad deal. So I hope that we not only are celebrating our 25th year, but we'll continue to celebrate not only the 25th, but maybe the 35th and so on. And I thank you for thinking about re-including SMILE. And I can offer one thought as far as transportation costs, because this has happened in other parts of the state and in communities that have a much larger distance area, which is, as in high school sports, if you decide to participate, your transportation home, because SMILE is based in the school where it starts, your transportation home has to be by a parent or a carpool. And this is very common. So if it came down to that, I could see where that would be an opportunity to save some money. Right. But as I said, it's certainly high school kids, after they finish practice at 5 or 6 o'clock, are not getting a late bus home.
All right. Thank you.
I think you can see from my seating position where my alliance is. I'd like to say that many years ago, in the early 1970s, when I moved to Rhode Island because I was offered a job at the university, I chose South Kingstown largely to live in, largely on the basis of the school system for my 3 children.
Could you just state your name for the record?
Larry Englander, sorry. Forgot that. I've been teaching at the university for just under 50 years. I have taught thousands of students, undergraduate students, and it's my mission in life. I get to know many of these students, and I have to tell you that it is noteworthy to me, and it should be as well to you, commendable to you, that I feel that there's an exceptional level of quality of many of the South Kingstown, former South Kingstown school system students. You can see and feel the difference in teaching them and conversing with them, and my confidence in the school system in this town was fully justified in that regard. I have to say that the program that was just described to you, the SMILE program that was initiated here and has spread through much of this, many parts of the state, was something I didn't necessarily think was of any interest to me initially, but I've learned it is one of the most incredible transformational programs for students. And I I participate in some of the events that they have around the state with the SMILE students from all over the state, and I hear the comments that they make, the students make. They're on the university campus and sensing and feeling what it's like to be there. And I don't mean the partying, I mean the academic aspects of it and the grandeur of the classroom situation. They look around and say, I could go to college. They hadn't thought of it before. It is literally transformational. And I'd like you to keep in mind, as I always do, the quality and the educational impact on these students affects each and every one of us, perhaps every day. They are the people that repair the brakes on your car. They are the people that come in the blinking blue lights on the EMT vehicle to save your life. The quality matters. The education is pivotal in doing this. And on the other hand, on a more menial matter, if somebody said to me, I'm going to give you a deal. You put $1 on this table and I'll take it, and I will give you $3 back. As long as I was closer to the exit door than that other person, I would take that deal. Keep the quality of the schools as high as they have been. It's notable, and I understand what you're up against. I think it's very disingenuous of the state to put a cap on the taxes and at the same time cut what they're giving you. And I don't understand how that can happen. I just learned this tonight from you. But I implore you to keep the quality of the product up there, or you won't have anything. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there, Bob Hackey from Wakefield. I just wanted to share 4 quick points as you folks are wrestling with the budget. Listening to the presentation tonight was very informative, but I think there's 4 points to keep in mind. The first one, I think, is that I would ask you to try to provide as much support as you can. I understand the constraints within the 4% cap, but if we could get as close to that as possible. One thing to remember is that our schools are a source of not only community pride, as you just heard, but also it's important if we're going to recruit young families to this district, if we want people to move into South Kingstown and buy our housing and live here and not be a retirement community, we have to have strong schools. And so cutting the budget to the bone is counterproductive from that sense. We need to be strong in the long run, and we need to have, we've talked a lot about enrollment. The way to turn enrollment around is to bring young families to this town to buy houses and to live here. Second point, the 1% transfer from the town, and I understand the fiscal constraints you're operating under. I think we have to be mindful of the fact that the previous school committee signed contractual arrangements that were in excess of 1% with our unions. We know that most of our costs are associated with personnel, and if we have personnel contracts that are in excess of 1%, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it doesn't require the kind of math that your council president just did to kind of find hundreds of thousands of dollars here to figure out that that's not going to be sufficient to fund the existing labor contracts. We have folks we have contractual obligations to. We have to meet those. The third point, and I think, Councilman DeCruz, I think you made a really interesting observation. I agree with you. We keep having the same conversation year after year here at this table. There's a reason for that, and I think you heard it. The state funding formula is terrible. Every year we take a hit of $600,000, $500,000, $700,000, whatever the number is. The only thing that is constant is the amount we get goes down. And this has been a secular trend for as long as the funding formula has been in existence. That's not our doing. It's not your doing. It puts you all in a hard spot. But that's something, as we look at local source revenue here, I mean, you start off behind the mark every year. And you have to race harder to keep up. And that's not fair. And I hope the legislators in our delegation can advocate for this. But I mean, the folks who currently benefit from this formula are not going to look to hand us back money. But I think that's a key part of this conversation. The last point, point of clarification. We keep talking about facilities, and we had a facilities study. Keep in mind, and the facility study, even as it was originally approved by the former school committee, never envisioned closing Wakefield School this year. Never envisioned closing Wakefield School for 3 to 5 years. Wakefield School was never part of this year's budget problem. This year's budget problem is way bigger than that. I think it's really important to remember that as we think about this, I know you have pressing needs on the town front. And I support EMS, and I support all of those things that we all use. And I think Councilman Veely, I think, made a really important point. You've got to represent all the taxpayers. But I think if we can find it within our means to get to that 4% tax transfer, which would kind of keep the bleeding to something that is not catastrophic on the school side. You guys have every year taken a hit. As long as I've been coming to these meetings, there's one theme every year, and that is something's getting cut. And so I'm not expecting there not to be cuts, but the question is, how do we find a way to do the least damage? And for me, that starts with a tax transfer to the schools that's closer to the 2% that we just talked about as being possible, and an increase in the property tax levy of 4%. I'd ask you to go to the max. I know it's hard. I know there are folks on fixed incomes in town, but I do think that this is in our long-term best interest as a community to support our schools. If we don't have strong schools, we're not going to be an attractive community for people to live in. Thank you.
Good evening. Taylor Ellis from West Kingston, a father of kids that went to South Kingstown, and now a grandfather with a kid coming along soon. I think that this, as was just said, the schools are a big backbone of this town because of decisions made in planning and zoning over the years. And, real estate values changing. Obviously, this town's getting older, less diverse, and many fewer kids. And that's something that would only get worse, as it was said, if the schools are cut further. I think, as was said by the council president, cuts in special ed is really horrifying. I mean, years ago, I had direct experience with trying to deal with the school system with kids with different learning styles with very little success. It wasn't good then. Maybe they've made improvements since, but then to be moving backwards again, to me, that is a terrible problem. And as someone said, maybe those people aren't at the table advocating because their lives are so challenging, dealing with kids that are different, with different learning styles and different issues. And then also making sure that our town is doing everything that it can and more to cut down the gaps, the performance gaps in education between people of privileged and people of color, or with people in poverty. And I'm not really sure how far the town has come in that, but I don't think we are where we need to be. That has to be identified, and there's other training that probably needs to be done to make our school system more working with everyone in our community, people of different color, different backgrounds. I think there's a lot of work that has to be done on that as well. And there was one slide that showed, I think it was saying 10 FTEs would be about a $350,000 amount. I mean, that's, $35,000 a year. I don't know if that's salary and benefits. I mean, that's like poverty wages. People like that can't live in this town. There's not rental housing. There's year-round rental housing that's affordable and things of that nature. I think that's a big problem. We need to invest in teachers. Now, I also would say throwing money isn't always the thing. I agree with that. And I'm not here to say that the school system has been great, but we have to fight to try to make it better.
Just to follow up on something that Mr. Ellis raised, I think in past years we have seen data on the gap that exists and sort of the progress that we've made in closing them. I know that we're very focused on the numbers this year, but I am interested in seeing those figures.
We'll send them to you.
Good evening. I emailed you all today. My name is Barbara Crudale. I am a taxpayer, parent of 4 children here in the district, 3 have graduated, and also your director of guidance at the high school. I emailed you in hopes I could share some information about the district guidance program. It is not your parents' or even your guidance program that we have here now. For instance, this year, the district purchased a program called Naviance. This is in compliance with RIDE regulations that all students have an individual learning plan. This plan is for students grades 6 through 12. They create goals for their future, think about career exploration, also think about personal goals and what they might want to do once they leave our high school. By expecting the school counselors to create a budget, the school committee to create a budget without a school counselor at Broad Rock, we could be in violation of RIDE regulations by not offering this program to those students. At Curtis Corner, there's 1 counselor. 400 students, 1 school counselor. Her role is the same as it is at the high school, to meet with students, to work with students, create that individual learning plan, and try to get them ready for their transition to the high school. Very difficult job she has, but she works the best she can to get those students ready to come to us at the high school. The high school last year, we offered and began a new early warning system. We identify students in 9th grade who may not graduate, work with them one-on-one. And as a district, we would not achieve a 95% graduation rate without the school counselors working one-on-one with these students. Your counselors were here this weekend and Monday morning to provide support so students stayed in school and received an education despite a major crisis unfolding in our community and affecting all of our students. Your counselors, though, provide this support daily in classroom lessons, to students in post-secondary planning, career exploration. We have increased the number of classroom lessons that we provide students every year and plan next year to increase the number of times we meet with each student one-on-one. I ended my email with an invitation for you to come to the high school, see the work that's being done by your teachers and by your school counselors, so that we can keep that 95% graduation rate, but hopefully increase it in the coming years. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Jim O'Neill, Matunic. We're certainly in a mess, but it always helps to know how we got in this situation. Back in 2001, when Broad Rock opened, to open Broad Rock, we had to pass a budget with a 17.5% increase. The following 4 years, we averaged another 8.85% increase. At the same time, the population dropped from 4,383 through 4,000. How we got in the position of the personnel issue, the population dropping by 400 the same period of time, we went from 519 FTEs to 621.2. And as you know, my numbers come from the Steve Alford School of Data and Finance. So they are correct. But that gives you an idea where it all began. Follow the population down from 4,000. When the education funding formula was born back in 2008, 9, and 10, the superintendent, the RIDE superintendent, Deborah Gist, came down here, just trying to find her quote, because at that time, in 2009, we were down to approximately 3,600 kids. And because of that massive increase of costs in 2001 opening Broad Rock, we had to close South Road School in 2005. Makes no sense. So Deborah Gist came down here, and I really need to find her quote here. Here it is here. Remember, we're down 800 kids. We've only closed the school for 300. And she warned us, and I quote, "Your school facilities and population loss must be brought into balance. Otherwise, your taxpayer dollars will find their way into other school districts," unquote. Boy, right on the money. Where are we today? Still 300? We're now down 1,400. From 4,383 when Broad Rock opened to 2,971 today, the last number I had. Think about that. Let's compare it with a couple other school districts. And these numbers are right from their superintendents. North Kingstown, 4,031 kids, 16,600 per students with their new budget forecast of approximately $6,700 million. What you need to know is they closed 2 elementary schools, their highest school population was 4,700. They're a little bit above 4,000. They closed 600 of schools, so almost a balance there. Guess what the state's doing from them? North Kingstown, from 10 million up to 10 million 3 this year. Education funding formula. Because they look, that's one of the most important parts of the EFF, is population. Poverty's in there, other things are in there. But I'm comparing it to schools. How about Cumberland? Cumberland really hasn't lost any kids, even with their mayoral academies up there. They're down a couple hundred kids, really have not closed any schools. Cumberland, 20,600,000, 21,200,000 last year to this year, up 600,000. Let's go to Westerly, 8,500,000 up to 8,800,000. They closed Bradford Elementary. They've averaged about 2,800 kids. They're 2,500 kids this year. A balance. Do you now see what our problem is? 1,400 with only a 300 closed. This gives you an idea why everything is out of balance here. I would suggest that, and I've said this to you before, no one seems to listen, but we need to close Curtis Corner School. Bob Hicks, when he was here, and this is none of your fault, none of you were here at that time in 08, 09, and he suggested that we could save $630,000. I've got all the paperwork, you know that, $630,000 a year, not counting percentage increases, by closing 2009 and 2010, before Kristen got with us, $630,000 a year. Well, now we're on 10 years. That's another $6-7 million. If you took the education funding formula, because we did not at least attempt by closing Curtis Corner School, we could have stayed, instead of, we were 10.6 million then. Today we're 5.4, according to the state budget that I have here today for South Kingstown. It shows 5,306,000, of course, according to their technical analysis. No other school comparison with us has dropped. They're all even or going up slightly. Barrington, you laugh at Barrington. They've averaged 3,400 kids over the last 10 years. And they're 3,359 right now. They spend all of 15,500 per year. We're 20,500 per year. Same thing with East Greenwich, 15,500.
That was 5 minutes, so just try to wrap it up.
Okay, I'll try to wrap it up. Okay, but Barrington, from 5,000,003 education funding formula, 5,000,007 last year to this year. It tells you everything you need to know that we have to do. We work with our reps. We beg them for mercy. Right. We go up there as a team. We say, get us back to 7 or 8 million, and we wouldn't be in this mess today, just simply because we refused. The responsible thing to do was to close Curtis Corner School. You've got to do that, and you have to do it next September. Don't cost us any more money than we've already lost. Thank you.
All right, good evening. Brian Nelson, NEA SK President. I want to start by thanking you all for your hard work that you're doing tonight regarding the budget. As a taxpayer and a lifelong resident of SK, I appreciate your fiscal responsibility. I also appreciate your commitment to our schools and our students. Most of you ran for office as supporters of public education, and please know we are very grateful for your support. The school committee has spent endless hours crafting a budget that includes extensive budget cuts, $3.8 million worth if I'm not mistaken, and that the budget has led them to make a request for a 2.5% property tax transfer. Even at a 2.5% number, many student-centered programs are being cut. Dozens of educators and staff are losing their jobs. $3.8 million is a huge amount of money in cuts. And to ask for any more is just indefensible. If the town council funds the school committee at less than 2.5% property tax, it's not the school committee you're hurting. It's not administration. It's students first and foremost. It's educators and support staff second. I implore you to do the right thing tonight. I know you support our schools, and now is the time to demonstrate that. Please approve the 2.5% property tax transfer to the school department. We are counting on you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Greg Sweet. You guys had a hell of a job to do, each and every one of you this year. I mean, it's difficult. As I heard, I think it was last Wednesday, there's a number of departments, police, EMS, and I think a few others that need a fair amount of money to provide better services, a matter of life and death services to all of South Kingstown, not just a certain segment. Excuse me. I think it's important to keep that in mind when you're going over what needs to be done as far as whether it's 2.5% or whatever, but EMS is extremely important to the entire town. And if they're shorthanded now, we're not even going to be able to afford to hire anybody else. If police is short one, we cannot afford to hire anybody else. That's pretty important. That can be pretty severe. So just keep that in mind.
Really sure I want to go after you just handled the microphone. I'm Jocelyn Leska, South Kingstown. First of all, thank you, each and every one of you, for the service and that you all do. There are times that citizens like myself can get frustrated and angry and concerned. My profession is a service profession, and I work with individuals who live throughout South Kingstown who are probably seeing their very worst day. And for whatever reason, during their very worst day, they're worried about the budget, which is astounding to me. That's a personal note. Mrs. Kelso, I don't know why your request to see a 1% budget proposal wasn't presented, because it was presented last night. And the school committee directed the superintendent not to show it. And I have the slides on my phone, and they're available on board docs if you want to see them. I certainly looked at them. And I'm angry that your request wasn't honored. And that's what makes me frustrated, is that people want transparency. The town council, as a body, supporters or opponents, asked you to bring something to tonight's meeting, and you refused to do it. And I don't know why you did that. But that's what makes citizens like me very upset. Please don't do that. It doesn't make you credible. It makes you not trustworthy. And right now, I don't trust you. And there are other people here who do not trust you. Mr. Vialli, I took what you said very much to heart. What we finish with this year is what we will negotiate a new contract with next year. And that's what the town needs to recognize, is we have a new CBA coming in 1 more year. And if you transfer a 2.5 or higher PTT, that's where you get to start next year with salary negotiations. And if no one is aware of what entry-level salaries are, the CBA is also on board docs, and it's not $34,000. I don't have much more to say. I did want to make a comment about the municipal budget. I spent a lot of time in this room listening to some incredible people present what they do. This town council heard some amazing people working with the same number of personnel and with even level funding that they have worked with for several years, with a population that has grown quite a bit, not declined, grown. You also heard from rec services and from the guild who were at level funding, and you are talking about people like myself, who I'll admit are part of the largest growing demographic in South Kingstown, who are not getting the services that we need. We're not getting police growth. We're not getting traffic patrols.
I live near the state beach. We have a problem every single day, all summer. And Chief Jaber knows it because my neighborhood and I went to a traffic meeting with him to discuss our concerns. Don't think you're going to run in my community. I do that because you can't run on my roads. It is not safe. So you drive into town and find a safe place. We don't have a traffic officer to assist us. So you are taking from services when you even fund us, and you don't give us increased services and money to provide for increased population. So you're taking from us to fund a school system. I think, but I'm not sure, that the town funded the Legacy Planning Committee $150,000. That's a question. I don't know if anybody wants to affirm it or if nobody really knows the answer at this moment. But is that money just money we've decided to throw away? Are we just all done with the legacy planning money? We're all done with the Legacy Planning Committee and all of their recommendations? That's the impression I got, and I continue to get it. And Mr. Zarneski, this is for you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I should have sent you an email. As you know, my husband and I spent a lot of time on the Far Rockaways after Hurricane Sandy doing hurricane reclamation. As we go into our debt service and we take more money to fund bond payments, what happens if we get hammered? Because it could happen. We do live on the coast. It has happened before. Thank you. President, sorry.
So there is a limit to how much you can borrow, and we are using some of our capacity when we do a school facilities program. But that's going to be true for anything that you invest in. I mean, if we were to do the rec center and something else, we're still going to use our capacity. It's like anyone's credit card. You only have so much on the credit limit, and you use as much of that as you need to accomplish the things that you need to do with debt. So it's not a permanent impairment, but it certainly would limit our capacity to borrow for other things. That's true.
So if you've never been in a hurricane like Sandy, and you've never done hurricane reclamation, which we did for a little over 2 years personally, a community that cannot access funding to provide emergency support to community members, to community services, is in desperate places. And I worked in those communities as a first aid responder and a first responder at the nurse practitioner level for almost 2 years. We don't want to be there. It is a very, very bad place to be, and we don't need to be there. That's the problem. We don't need to be there. So thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification, we're not really considering level funding municipal services. We're contemplating a significant increase of 6% at this point. That's, eaten up largely by salary and wage or benefit increases. Similar things that the school committee has to deal with. I would, for me up here, I don't like to think of this as an adversarial relationship between the schools and the town. We're all part of a municipal program. We're providing services to the whole town, schools, municipality alike. And so it's, I hope we're not seeing it that way.
Mr. President, if I may, I also want to point out that there are things in the municipal budget that are above what we were doing last year. There is an additional part-time person for the senior center. There is an arborist to start taking care of town trees and to start beginning some training beyond that. There's an arborist's truck to begin getting, again, a handle on the state of our forest. So it isn't a completely flat municipal budget. We are strategically beginning to address priorities that we think we have to address. There are priorities that we have had to not address at this point. That's absolutely true as well. Yes.
Please.
My name is Meg Healy. I'm from the Matunic area. I had no intentions of speaking because You are all my comrades. I sat on that side of the table for 6 years until November. I'm only going to briefly touch to Brian's point because I go to South County Hospital twice a week for my infusions. And there was a gentleman there who needed a transport, and there was no rescue to take him. So they called in municipal aid, and Charlestown came in. We have a strong need. We have 31,000 plus residents. And we have to count on other towns to help us, and the help isn't always there. But that's all I'm going to say about that. What I did want to say is we have well, I'll say it this way. I fully support the teachers in our town, the administrators in our town, and the quality of education that our children receive, including my two who went through the school system. We absolutely have to support our schools. That being said, while declining enrollment is a fact that we are living with our younger generation, we are also living with an aging population that also needs our help. The town's aging population has increased substantially. We can't afford, I listened to the gentleman so respectfully, we can't afford a full 4% tax increase. We just can't. Let's just get to the bottom line. We just can't do it. And on top of a 4% increase that we may be asked to have to live with because we choose to live here, you all have to remember, come the fall, you're asking for another $67 million in bonding. We have about $9 right now $1 million in debt. That's a big chunk of change for us. That's going to cost us a lot of money. I'm not saying to cut things and not to do things, but you have to remember, you know what? Like my parents always said, if you don't have the money, you buy more macaroni and just make pasta. Because guess what? The cupboards sometimes run dry. And we are a wealthy town. Don't negate what I'm saying. Just keep in mind that based on the history of this town, we have been prudent in our spending. We've done well in our spending. And because of the way we've managed the money in this town, we have a viable host of services. People want to be here. But if we continue at 4% and then $67 million, I'm scared. I'm really scared. That's all I have to say. I sat on that side of the table until November, and I'm not there now. I trust all of you, and so do the voters, because that's why you're sitting up there. And we want you to make the most prudent and best decisions for this town financially. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Thank you.
Hi there. Jason Ralph. I guess I'm Matunic. I live on the border of Matunic and Wakefield. Unlike most of the people here, I'm not really worried about this year. I think whatever is decided is going to be okay. Even if it's, I know it's maybe not a popular opinion, but even at 1%, the kids would be okay. Kids are resilient. And if we end up with a 4% tax increase, the town will survive. What I'm worried about is the future. I'm tired. Can we just stop this charade? Just stop it. Instead of a plan for long-term operational savings, we're here with a scary list of cuts that no one wants to make. And the purpose is to shame town council into giving more money for less students like we do every single year. on the table today, the school committee was, was sworn in. There was a long-term plan on the table that could have provided the operational flexibility to stop this from happening every single year, to stop this charade from happening. I understand that that plan did not provide savings for this year. I'm not talking about this year, I'm talking about the future. When you came to office, I was shocked that there wasn't a long-term plan in place to replace the operational savings that you were throwing away. I'm even more shocked that now, 5 months later, we still have no plan. Zero budgeting for 1 year is not a long-term plan. There are towns where this doesn't happen every year, where children aren't pitted against seniors, where governments work together and plan for the future, and the tears of the town aren't used as political tools. Stop it. Town council, you know as well as anyone that there's only one way to stop this from happening. Go back to the drawing board. If you want to give 2.5, 3.5, whatever, that's fine. But we need a long-term plan. The taxpayers of this town deserve a solid, written out, 5 to 10 year plan of how we get from here to there and how we stop this charade from happening every single year, where we just fight over a cut list every year. This is not sane governing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Manis. I emailed most of you earlier today, but I just had some additional thoughts I wanted to share as we were sitting here. I want to first thank you all for your service, and I do want to commend the school committee because they spent hours. I was there talking about how to make cuts to get to the 1%, and to their credit, we couldn't do it without causing harm to the education of our students. They tried, and they debated it. It wasn't like they just chose to ignore your request. It was a thoughtful, long process, and I wanted to give credit to that. I think, we've thrown around a lot of numbers tonight, and I'm an accountant, I love numbers, but I think, 1%, 2%, 2.5%, it's easy to talk about numbers when you don't take a step back and think about what's behind those numbers and put faces behind those numbers. As Rob pointed out, most of the budget is personnel, and most of the increase in the budget is due to teachers' raises and teacher benefits. And by saying that you only support 1% is basically saying that you don't support the raises for the teachers, or you support the raises for the teachers, but only if all the support systems for the teachers are eliminated, like social emotional coaches, guidance, tech coaches, SMILE, CARES, making class sizes as large as possible and with less TAs. And that's just not acceptable. And to Michelle's point, why do we expect costs to go down? Things cost more money. Even people on fixed incomes, like Social Security, got a 2.8% increase in the cost of living adjustment for their income. So costs do go up. And I also wanted to back up Alicia's comment about sports. We are cutting sports in this budget. We're cutting all the intramural sports from the middle schools and the high schools. And that's just the first step, as she said. It's varsity sports are the next level. And, I was at the 7th grade incoming night last night, and they put up this lovely list of all these awesome intramural sports that they have. And I'm sitting there saying, no, that's not actually going to happen. And 200 kids are going to be really disappointed next year when they show up, and none of those sports are actually happening. It's just the few middle school inter-district sports that are happening. So, there's a lot of talk about planning for the future, and I agree that needs to happen, but I think, what is clear from the way the votes went this September is that our community is saying that they can't handle extra taxes because of the way they voted. By having community schools, that meant being willing to have pay more taxes. That's the price you pay to live in this community. Having senior services and having a small community and not growing the way other communities might to expand their tax basis. We want to keep our tax basis down. That means it costs more to live here, and that's just a fact.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to add, Monique Chartier, South Kingstown. I'd like to add a little context to the comments that were just made. Left out of that is the fact that student enrollment in the schools, South Kingstown schools, has dropped by 1/3 since the year 2000. As we all know, the largest chunk of the budget and the largest consumption of property taxes is the school budget. So what has happened to property taxes since 2000? Have they dropped by 1/3? They have not. Some drop would have been nice. Minimally level funding would be preferable. Scare cuts are not the way to go. Realistic budgeting needs to be done, taking into consideration that student enrollment has dropped by 1/3 and that it is projected long-term to continue to drop. We look to the town council to have some rational thinking with regard to taxes. Taxes in Rhode Island generally are in the top 20%. South Kingstown is not an exception to that. So we would certainly look to the town council to please do the right thing by the taxpayers and also take into consideration the history of the funding of the schools here. It has been quite generous, as a matter of fact. So we would ask you to take that into consideration. And if we can't cut taxes this year, certainly minimally a level funding of the school budget is certainly in order. Thank you very much for listening.
Somebody's pen?
That's mine.
Good evening. My name is Doral Beasley. I live in Kingston. I've lived in Kingston since I was 8. That's in my 6th decade of living here. Every 2 years in our town, the candidates, be it for the town council or the school committee, they all seem to run on the same platform. Maintain our quality of life, support our great schools, keep our sense of place, whatever that means, and keep taxes low. It's like the superfecta. It's a superfecta of you can't get there. You can't do all of that. In mid-70s, after 15 years of incredible growth in town, especially with students, so in 54 we opened a new high school. In 64 we opened 3 schools, Curtis Corner, Wakefield, and South Road. 1975, we opened up West Kingston and Matunic. 95, we put an addition on the high school, and then in 2001, we built Broad Rock. We supported our schools in this town. Whenever they needed additional space for our students, we supported our schools. But now we're in a different phase. As the person before me said, we've lost 1/3 of our students. So my first question is, we've lost 1/3 of our students, but Barrington's hasn't lost any students. East Greenwich, their students are going up. A lot of this districts north of Providence,
their district populations are increasing. So why isn't our state level? And the thing is, I'm not just talking to this town council, but the town council before that, and the 2 years before that, and before that, and before that. None of these town councils has cared or worried about our declining school population. In 1975, we upzoned the entire town. So in areas where it used to be R10, turning to R20, 20 to 40, 40 to 80. So in those areas in town, if you were going to buy a piece of land, it automatically doubled the price of the land. So over time, developers, with the price of land as it increased, to maximize their profits, they stopped building starter homes like the one I live in, the old Arnold Lumber, the Berger Lumber homes, 1,250 to 1,750 square feet, no garage. Nobody builds that house anymore. And the price of land is so expensive that a young couple cannot move to South Kingstown and buy a 20,000, a half-acre piece of land in South Kingstown right now is $100,000 to start if it's not underwater. So and then we put moratoriums on how many houses we could build every year. So over these 40 years, 45 years since we put all those things into place, we didn't monitor what was going on. So it took a long time. It took to like a little after 2000 that the numbers started to drop. To me, I don't want to live in a town without kids. One of my favorite things in my life now, in the fall, is going down and watching my two grandsons and all their friends and all their cousins and all their cousins' friends play flag football on Old Mountain Field. It's a blast. I mean, it's girls with in the younger grades, it's the girls and the boys on the same teams. The girls are faster than some of the boys. They're smoking them. It's fabulous. Okay? And the same thing happens in the winter in the rec center, in the basketball leagues. Go there on any Saturday morning. You can sit in the stands and just have a blast watching these kids beat each other to a pulp. It's wonderful. But those things are declining in our town because we don't have any means to bring young families here anymore. We have to figure out a way to do it. That's your job.
Mr. Beasley, we definitely appreciate that, I think. And I think we are making efforts, slowly as they may be, to try and address those issues. But you have gone past your 5 minutes at this point.
Okay. Maybe I could come back for a couple more before we're done.
All right. Is there any more public comment out there?
I'm Christine Pierce. I teach at Peacedale, which...
Could you just pull the mic?
Sorry, I'm Christine Pierce. I teach at Peacedale, which most of you probably know because you probably recognize me, and please don't say, oh, God. I don't have a solution. I'd just like to challenge a couple of things. I keep hearing about numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I do not ever see 6 children. I see anywhere from 15 to 23 in front of me, and I know the numbers are an average of personnel. 23 kindergartners is a whole lot different, if you picture it, than the ratio that you're talking about of our entire staff as a 6-to-1 ratio. One of the things that I've done over the last, I think I'm in year 19, is I'm always interested in advocating for children who other people have mentioned, whose families often aren't able to advocate for them. I don't think that a lot of the things we're seeing on this budget are scare tactics. I think they're a reality. I think that the people at this table have deliberated very carefully. I don't envy you having to do that. I know you don't want those things up there. I don't think you're putting them up there to terrify anybody into being extorted into giving money. That being said, a lot of the things that I see up there are things that are very dear to me because I've worked for, again, my entire teaching career to advocate for those children. I'm one of those expensive people, by the way. And when we're talking about personnel, one of the first questions they asked me when I came here was, do you plan to spend your life in South Kingstown? And I said, yes! That's all I want to do, is stay here forever. And to be part of a community, which the community that I've dedicated most of my time to is Peacedale. So when we're talking about these things, I just want people to try to remember, and I get the taxpayer thing, because I am too, and believe me, I feel like when I get my paycheck, I'm like, where is it? Oh my God, I get it. That it isn't, it's children's opportunities that we're talking about. The SMILE program, these are kids that are going to be college directed, who have no members of their family who've ever gone to college. Again, it's not always just numbers. It's opportunities for our children. And I think the thing I wanted to give a positive note, and you know we just finished a big gear play. There's 230 children. And one of the things that the kids shared with me was how accomplished they felt. And that's what we're trying to give our kids, is that sense of accomplishment. And they don't all get there the same way. And some of them, it takes so many more resources to get them there. And the things that we're seeing on this cut list are those resources. TAs, you have no idea. Come to an elementary school. Please walk around for a couple of days at Peacedale. Watch what our TAs do. They provide opportunities for kids simply by being face-to-face with them. All of these little tiny cuts affect some of our most at-risk children. And you can't get that back. You can't get kindergarten and first grade and second grade without enough support back. You just can't. So this year may seem like a line in the sand, but for some of these kids, it's going to affect them for the rest of their life. Now, I know you have tough choices and you need to make long-term plans. I get it. I hope that this year is not the line in the sand, because it'll make a huge, huge difference, either positive or negative, for so many kids. And these are the kids that are dearest to me. So again, I don't have an answer. I just wanted to share the perspective of someone who's spent their life here teaching, and the children that I really desperately want to advocate for. Thank you.
Hi, Gary Chapman, Wakefield. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the transportation and ask a few questions on that. Charahoe also has a large transportation cost. I think it's again, over $4 million. And they have, as you know, a very big area that they cover also. They had the same problem, and they probably still do have the same problem to some degree, that they were running buses throughout the district that were not nearly to capacity, and they tried to figure out what could they do about it. And I'm sure South Kingstown knows about Charahoe, but I went over and sat down with the superintendent and went over what they do. I mean, they started a program where they actually made, they knew a lot of people were dropping and picking their children up, so they send out letters to everyone making them commit to the bus, that you have a bus, we will bus every single one of you, but if you're not going to take the bus, tell us you're not going to take the bus. They actually put together, well, how come you're not doing it? Well, their parents weren't willing to commit either. What happened was that they kept sending out letters, and they have telephone calls you can make if you haven't signed up, and they kept doing that. And they kept getting a little more and a little more, and then finally when it came to the end where they had to put the bus schedules together, he told me that they actually put the bus schedules together as if they were busing everyone, but the ones that didn't respond, they left off the published list. And then they got a lot of calls when the list came out, that how come they weren't on the bus schedule. And then everybody signed up. And the point of the matter is that I think parents of children in this town would be willing to do that. If you're going to drop your kids off every day and pick them up, why should we run a bus? They saved $160,000 in the first year. I know it's not a lot of money, but it's something. So I just wanted to bring that up so that maybe we could institute that. And I'm sure Charo would be happy to give you his policy and all that stuff. Good. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, you do have a difficult a job, and I think, Abel, you're right. We don't want to pit town against school. I think that's not the right way to do it. But I think that you have to decide some of the things that are going on. Last year they came in with 2.3, and we gave the school department 2.6 or 2.9 or whatever it was. That becomes the base that we start on this year. And so whatever you decide to do, that's the base next year. And what concerns me is that as we go forward with this bonded indebtedness, the finance director has given us what the costs were going to be tax-wise in the mid-20s. It's going to be over $300 additional to the average house in town's tax bill, but it's going to be even more if we don't get the operational costs of the school department under control. It's going to be a lot more. So if we're having less enrollment and we can save money by right-sizing the population in the buildings together, I think it makes sense. It's not going to save us this year or maybe next year, but down the road, I think it's going to make a lot of sense. When we talk about transportation and the size of the town, just a few nights ago at your work session, budget work session with EMS, and a lot of people have talked about that. But I think it's important to keep that in mind. That at nighttime, the size of our town, we're running from the public safety building on Kingstown Road to everywhere in the town. That's a significant distance. And so I think that we need to put some budget attention to that. And I know the town manager has been talking about that. But if we need to do a 24-hour from the old police station on Route 1, I think it makes sense. It gets to the South Shore quicker. But we don't need to talk about that now. But the reason why I bring it up is because there are lots of pressing issues in this town that needs money, and we can only ask taxpayers for so much. And so that's why I just wanted to bring up that. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Chris Hubbard. I'm a Wakefield resident with 3 young kids. The oldest is a second grader. The middle one will be a kindergartner this coming year, and the little one's a couple years behind her. We are in this town for the school system. We moved here because we love the town. We love being here. We're not originally from Rhode Island, but we are here because of the school system. Other than that, there's really nothing holding us here. There's plenty of other really beautiful places to move to. The reason I bring this up is this decision, deciding who we are as a town and how we're going to fund the schools and whatnot, could make the decision for you. Make this not a great school system, do anything to upset that apple cart. And we're starting to, the first couple of years, my oldest daughter was completely insulated from these kinds of things. She's starting to hear bits and pieces of this now. We're watching this really carefully, and I don't mean that at all threatening at all. If the town wants to be a town not attracting young families and keeping the school system improving, maybe it is the better choice. But I think you need to get out ahead of this and think about this. We're talking about attracting people or what we're going to be. But there's a lot of people, I think, that are in my situation who don't work here, who don't have to be here, who are here for the school systems and could move on relatively easily. Thank you.
Good evening, Michelle Neary. I'm a Wakefield resident. I'd like to echo what Chris said. Many young families move here for the schools. That's what we did. A 2.5 increase already includes drastic cuts to our programs and our resources that make our schools a wonderful, functioning, productive place for kids to be. And I appreciate the work that went into a 2.5 reduction, a 2.5 increase budget from our school committee. I think that was a lot of hard work and tough choices. I hear a lot of talk about districts in our area, and districts in our area have been increasing funds, increasing programs, increasing resources. As a result, their enrollment's going up. There are districts where kids from our town are going because they increase their budget, they increase their resources. If we want to be a town, or we want to ensure that we're a town that families want to move to, that out-of-district school kids want to come to, that we are not losing kids to private schools or charter schools or other CTE programs, we need to fund our schools adequately. And I think a 2.5 increase is a reasonable minimum property tax transfer to ensure that our kids get a quality education. I hear a lot of discussion about salaries and teachers. I'm a public school teacher myself, not in South Kingstown, but a public school teacher nonetheless. And I can tell you that a competitive teacher salary attracts quality teachers. If teacher salaries go down or teacher raises don't happen, teachers will go elsewhere. And we will not have the quality bank of teachers. And my daughter has had an amazing experience. She's currently a second grader. I understand that a 2.5 property tax transfer would require cuts or revisions to the town budgets, but schools are what attracts families. And we are a family-oriented town. If we want young couples who would become families or current families to move here, we need adequately funded schools. So I ask that the town council see the value in granting this 2.5 reasonable property tax transfer and support our schools. Thank you.
Hi, Tara Apperson. I sent you all a letter, so I'll try not to be redundant and make some different points. I have a lot of thoughts, so I'll try to keep it streamlined, but I feel like we keep hearing the same questions being asked. Why isn't our per pupil expenditure as low as Barrington and East Greenwich? Why isn't our budget declining at the rate of our population? Why do we keep ending up in this position every year? And I feel like we have heard good answers to those questions, and I hope that you all are listening to those answers because they make sense. It's not just about a bottom line. It's a lot more complicated than that. You heard it tonight. I'm not going to rehash it. But I do want to speak to what's going to happen to our kids if we further reduce the budget, and they will be hurt. I think it's disingenuous to say that our kids will be fine, because some of them might, but some of them probably won't be fine without the summer program, the Smiles program, counselors. And those kids that aren't going to be okay are the kids that have the highest need. They're the ones that are going to suffer the most, and we have a responsibility to provide for them more than just their academics. We need to provide wraparound services for those kids, and cutting more than 2.5% or not giving the school committee more than you know what I'm trying to say. If we give the school committee less than what they're asking for, that is going to have a profound effect on some kids. Just a couple other things. I did put this in my letter, but our per pupil spending is not the highest out of all of our neighboring districts. We're actually in the middle of some of them. Westerly and Narragansett spend more than us, NK and EG spend less, so I just keep that in mind. I keep hearing we spend so much, we don't spend the most. And just one other thing, my interpretation of last night's school committee meeting and what they prepared was not that they had a fully developed budget at 1% that they are withholding from you by any means. They are not withholding this drafted 1% budget from you. The last slide that you saw, that's basically what they came up with. It's on board docs, it's public, it's transparent. And the last thing I just want to ask, one thing I didn't hear you discuss, it's my turn, thanks, is the unassigned fund balance. So I'm just wondering if there's any way we could take $500,000 from that to spend on the debt service, since it's a one-time expenditure and it wouldn't cause a structural deficit. So I didn't hear that come up tonight. I'd like to see that discussed. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mick Lafort. I'm a sixth grade teacher at Broad Rock Middle School. I'm also the NEASC Vice President. There are lots of things I'd love to talk about right now, but hearing a lot of the same things over and over, and I want to give you a perspective that I keep hearing about but not hearing from. I am, or my family is, that typical family that should be coming here. My wife and I have a 2-year-old, right, and well, let me go back in my journey. Like a lot of Rhode Islanders, I went to URI, lived here, fell in love with South Kingstown, and the whole journey was, let's get back to South Kingstown. Going into education, I started in East Providence, at East Providence High School. As Michelle and Kristen can attest to, East Providence has a really unique, they're the townies. It's the spirit of community. And I can remember, so I'm at East Providence High School, and the goal is, again, to get back down this way to South Kingstown. So my wife and I buy a house in North Kingstown. We're getting closer. Eventually, there's an opening in South Kingstown at Broad Rock, and I apply for that job. And I can remember in the interview, at the very end, there was a question, is there anything else that you want to add? And, sometimes you rehearse really well for that. Sometimes it just comes to you. And it hit me that it was such a pleasure teaching in East Providence because of that community. And even though I was in North Kingstown and not quite South Kingstown, I was excited to be closer to a community, to be part of that. Living in NK and teaching in East Providence, I didn't feel like I wasn't a townie, but I wanted to be a townie. This was the opportunity to come down and be a South Kingstown version of that. So, I live in North Kingstown, I teach in South Kingstown. The next part of the puzzle should be moving into South Kingstown. That's what we're talking about. I have a 2-year-old that is going to be going into public education. What's really, really sad and tough to say, as a teacher who works with the students in this town, I love my job. As a union leader, I have nothing but faith in the teachers of this community, but based on the cuts and what's going on here, the 2.5, but even to look at that 1%, I'm thankful that my family never finished that journey. I'm glad we live in North Kingstown and not South Kingstown, based on what we're looking at right now. And again, that pains me a lot to say, but it's the reality when we look at the services that are being pulled from our teachers and our learners and our teachers.
Any other public comment? All right, Doral.
So I can't remember, the Jekyll and Hyde story. Who was the good guy? Hyde? Jekyll was the good guy? All right, my first time vampire, I was Jekyll. But I do have some good news for the Save Our Wakefield School crowd. I no longer, keeping Wakefield School open could allow us to not have to put any addition on Broad Rock School. I think the building committee will be taking up the discussion, so that's really good news, I think. Save money there, spend it elsewhere. All right. South Kingstown, as the town manager mentioned earlier, we have about a 6-to-1 employee to student ratio, or student to employee ratio here. It's about 9.5 to 1 students to a teacher. Other towns, okay, the 3 most expensive towns, cost per student in Rhode Island, that are not, that have a high school and that are not a regional school, top 3, Westerly, Narragansett, us, and number 4, they all flip-flop, is Newport. Okay, interestingly, Newport, Westerly, and Narragansett, they all have their own bus systems. They provide money. They hire their own bus drivers, monitors, they have their own buses. Okay, so when you factor that out, so for instance, Westerly has 75 people that do transportation on their payroll, 75 FTEs. It's amazing. Every time I get to speak, people leave. I guess they've seen me before. Holy cow. Anyway, so when you take out the 75 FTEs in Westerly and the 26 out of Narragansett, all 3 districts, about 6-to-1 ratio, almost exactly the same, 6-to-1 employee to student employee. Now, then you'll say, well, other towns are 7-to-1, other towns 7.5-to-1. A lot of towns in Rhode Island, I just looked at them all. We have a lot of 7.5s, got some 8s. Barrington's 8.5. How do they do it? Don't know, but they do. All right, but the differential between a 6-to-1 and a 7-to-1 is astronomical. It means, okay, so we have 485 people on payroll right now, and our budget's 400 for those people, salary and benefits, all the stuff, not all the rest of it, the operational expenses. So it's like $100,000 per employee. Just add, that's the average, 485 into 48,500,000. All right, so if we had a 7-to-1 ratio, we'd have 425 employees. Now, that is a differential of 60 people, 60 times 100,000, that's $6 million. Okay, there comes a time where you can spend money, but it's the law of diminishing returns. Because if you look at our test scores, the only way you can see whether or not we're as good as other districts, I hate to say it, but that's the way it is, these standardized tests. Go look at our last couple of years of the Park exam. Our high school was in the 40s, 40%. Barrington, 79 in the English. Okay, they do it with 132 less employees than we do. How's that possible? Demographically, we're almost exactly the same. The only thing, the difference between South Kingstown and Barrington is we have more kids on subsidized lunch. Okay, but over there, they have almost twice as many kids now on the ELL program. And yes, they have less costs for their transportation, but the differential is only about $1,375 per person when you subtract the two. So the bottom line is this: let's say we decided we were going to save 485 employees for the next 20 years. It would cost this town, with a 2% raise a year, over those 20 years, $1,250,000. With a 7-to-1 ratio, it's down to $1,095,000. And an 8-to-1, it's $960,000. So we're talking between $130 and almost $300 million differential. If we don't get control, we cannot continue on this ratio of 6-to-1.
Doral, can I stop you there? I think we got that point, though.
Let me just check my notes here. Is there a line item in our budget for substitute teachers? How much is it? Okay, this is not a joke, okay? We don't need to hire substitute teachers. We have enough teachers. We have enough teachers and teachers' aides in this school district today. You could eliminate that line item. And lastly, bus monitors. Do we hire our bus monitors, or is the bus company? Okay. All right. You need to talk to the bus company, because I've seen this not in just South Kingstown. A bus monitor has to be physically able, especially the elementary school buses. They have to be physically able to bend over far enough and actually look under the bus. I can't tell you how many times I've been behind school buses, not just here, but all over the place, where these monitors cannot, either they're so frail they can't get over because they probably couldn't get up, or they can't get over because their body fat content doesn't allow them to. That is, I mean, seriously, that is a safety issue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beasley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Koziarek. I'd like to talk on transportation for just a moment. I'll be brief. I know everybody wants to get out of here. I'm part of transportation over the years. I drove a school bus in SK here for about 8 years. I was with First Student when they had the contract. When Ocean State got the contract, I was a bus driver for about 4 years with Ocean State. In my opinion, and Dr. Stringfellow, you work hard at this. Transportation is not very efficient in South Kingstown. It's a big part of our budget, and they could do things so much more efficient if we work together with everyone. I know it's not part of this budget. This budget, the contracts are set, but going in the future, maybe we could save some money on it. One example is Wednesday mornings for the high school run. They had faculty meetings Wednesday morning at the high school, so the kids were not in school. We have 20 bus drivers driving around and picking up no one every Wednesday. If we did pick up a couple of students, they walk to McDonald's and get breakfast. Not only the cost of those 20 people, 20 employees, the amount of fuel driving around town for an hour and a half is pretty significant. So I think transportation, we could save some money on transportation in the future. And I want to thank everybody that's here. I know how hard everybody works in this room. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Hi, Stacy Bozzioni, Wakefield. Thank you all. I know it's a late night. We'll make this quick. I'm concerned at the cuts that will be made if the school committee is to receive a 2.5% property tax transfer. I'm very worried about the loss of the intramural sports and the late bus. Those kids are middle school kids. We know they're the kids that are at most or the highest risk to begin abusing alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. And now we're not giving them anything to do after school. And if they do stay after school, they don't have a ride home. They can't even stay for extra help and get a ride home. So there's a whole other aspect that hurts the kids. And if you go further into 1% and we lose guidance counselors, Mrs. Crudale was wonderful in the things that she talked about, but she didn't tell you all of the things that they do. My goodness, if you've been a parent of a high schooler, you know what the guidance counselors are doing. They're so busy. They're meeting for IEP meetings. They're meeting for kids who have sports-related injuries. They're meeting to go over schedules. My kids went in and said, how's this list of colleges? Do you think it's good for me? You know, you probably did that, Rory. You probably went in and talked about those things. That's not scheduled in their day, and all of a sudden somebody's popping in, and we can't lose them. The kids can't lose them. They are overburdened already, and our kids need them, and there is no one to speak for the children except for us adults. And the kids whose parents can't speak for them, I hope that you'll be thinking of them when you're considering the budget. Thank you.
Want to speak? It'll be my second time. Come on up.
My name is Erica Estes. I actually had no intention of speaking, but I feel strongly about something, and I thought I should share it, and I'll be brief. Listening to everything, I just, as a parent, 2 kids in the SK school system, both at the high school right now. I'm also a pharmacist, and I'm also an educator at URI. Our kids cannot handle these cuts. And 3 things that speak to me from the list and listening to everyone. One thing that wasn't brought up was the social emotional learning coach. And I know this has been raised before, and I just want to make a point about this from personal experience with my kids and the role that Mrs. Murphy has played at the high school with the students. There's a culture there right now. There's a climate, and it's palpable. You can feel it. You can see the difference from those positive programs. If anyone has been, I don't know if you have children in the high school, but Monday mornings, during advisory, she meets with those kids. And the library is full of energy and kids working together, future leaders. These are not skills that you teach in a classroom. This is someone who's dedicating her time to invest in these children. And my son is a senior. He has benefited tremendously from this program. And I know that program also benefits kids much younger in other schools as well. So I can't speak enough to the positive impact that's had. And the kids have been speaking to each other, to the teachers. They're very upset by the fact that this is going to be something that could possibly be reduced next year. I also wanted to make a point about the guidance office. My son's a senior. My other son's a freshman. 100% they are understaffed as it is. If there's even any remote chance of losing any more people in guidance, that would be detrimental, not just for the college-bound kids, but just for all of the roles that they play in the school. It's huge. So I think that's something that can't be understated. And one other thing, I was at the prayer vigil today at the beach for the SK students, and speaking from a community aspect, if anyone was there, I don't know if anyone was, it was amazing. Hundreds of people from our district at the beach supporting those students and the whole town, the whole community. So what I'm asking you is think about that. Think about investing in these students and these kids as future leaders, future members of this town. They want to stay here. They want to live here. They were proud to be a part of that. If they knew that all of these things were in danger, it would drastically affect the culture even more than it does right now. So I love to think that you think of them not just as students, and I also work with the elderly, so I appreciated the comment about pitting students versus elderly, but these students are the community, and they are part of the community, and this is something that should be thought of like that. When we were at a meeting that Mrs. Murphy ran, Kate was there a few weeks ago, for the Choose Love movement, and there was community people there. Our kids in the high school are part of this community, and they're engaging in programs to try and infuse that message outside of the walls of South Kingstown High School. And I don't know if anyone appreciates the momentum that's there right now, and it's all, again, part of that. So our students are doing amazing things, and they cannot do these things if the budget is in jeopardy. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Jim O'Neill, I'll try to make this quick. Of all the communities we've talked about tonight, Cumberland, Barrington, Lincoln, I forgot about, Narragansett, Newport, North Kingstown, and Westerly, and I have the records here from the state. Not one of them has lost $1 over the last 10 years since the education funding formula began. Think about that. Most of them are cohorts. South Kingstown, 50% drop, 10.6 million to 5.3. Have you figured it out? It's because we're the only place that has not measured their facilities with our budgets. We're the only ones. And I told you what Deborah Gist told me years ago. So you've got to keep that in mind here. That's very important. The money's there. If we got back just half of that, 5.3 million, if we could get back to 7 or 8 million, we wouldn't be here tonight. This is why we're here. This is why we have a problem. The problem is to earn more, you've got to close that Curtis Scotus School this September, not a year from September, this September, and then we can all go up and beg from the ride. A couple other things. So you missed a huge article a year ago, Why Massachusetts Schools Are Better. They compared poverty levels. They picked Smithfield, Plymouth, Mass, Weymouth, Cumberland, Beverly, North Kingstown, even Barrington and Marblehead. The answer wasn't money. It says right here, money is not the answer. Forget demographics. It's what Massachusetts, obviously, we've learned from the Common Assessment scores. Apparently, they've got better programs. So hopefully that will help us in the future here. And a couple other things you heard tonight from the manager, 76% of our budget. I don't know how high it's going to be in 2 or 3 years with the bonding, a new contract, the operational system, but also, too, we're forgetting about the escrow for maintenance so the state doesn't have to cough up huge bond money in the future. That's going to be a huge expense, huge expense. I have an office downtown. We've been looking for street lights to come up to the Mews, come around the corner to the Laundry, even in Peacedale. We'd love to have that. We'd love to have another policeman or two. With the rescue system increased, our bike paths, our roads all need to be improved. Affordable housing, all these combinations that need some help. Our ramps down there to launch boats. And just to finally do the math, the 9 years since we've lost, started at 10.5 million. If you straight line it now to 5.5 million, that's over $20 million of lost money because we made no effort to control our facilities and manage our facilities. And frankly, if you close Curtis Corner, most of that staff would stay with the kids, moving and spread out to the rest. That's probably the least costly in terms of personnel loss. So you've got to consider it. But 76%, you've got to start giving back to the other community members here. Thank you.
Alrighty, folks.
I have one good piece of news for you. Then I quit.
Can you keep it to 2 minutes, George?
Oh, yeah. All right, so sorry I don't have a copy of this for everybody. So when I was doing my number crunching over these months, what you see here is I hate to say this, so you see these the blue bars, that's the enrollment at the start of the year, and then that's the enrollment at the start of the next year. Because see, when you're in a town where you have a flat enrollment, you don't have any problem. If your enrollment is going up, you don't have a problem because if you got more students, you hire more teachers. But when your enrollment goes down, I think you have a cumulative effect because what we do in this town is we develop our budget on the October 1st enrollment number.
But every year for the last, how many years, right? That number drops. So by the next September, when the schools open up, you've developed a budget for last October's numbers, and then you open the school to the new numbers. So what happens is every year, it's an accumulative. All those drops, you've missed since 2009, about 738, the 738 student drop there, when you divide it by your average school, your class size is about 20, so it's like 37 teachers or employees. You can't, when your enrollment's dropping, you can't develop your budget on the October 1st number. You have to do it, since you know it's going down and down and down, you have to forecast what it may be and then develop your budget on the lower number. Otherwise, you just enshrine that differential year after year after year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Are there any folks who want to speak who haven't spoken tonight? All right. At this point, then, are there any comments up at the table?
Just one point to the comment about Deborah Gist coming to South Kingstown and retaliating for us not closing enough schools or whatever and not giving us money based on that. What happened was she came to South Kingstown and she said that you're not relying on your property taxes enough, that South Kingstown can afford to fund the school budget more aggressively than it had been, and that the state was going to take away some funding based on that. And what followed was level funding of the schools for several years, and that has impacted the quality of education we can provide, and we haven't really recovered from that. We're getting less state and aid, and we're also getting less funding from the town. And so to come in now and ask for 2.5%, I think we're, in a sense, it's like, sure, maybe we could have asked for 1.75 or something, or 1.5, if we hadn't been level funded for several years at the same time that the state gave us less funding. So I just think people should keep that in mind, too.
Certainly. I don't think there's a great deal of love in this state for Deborah Gist anyway, so I don't know that her opinion is worth much. Other comments?
I have a few things that I was listening to everyone. One of the things was last said was about the vigil today, which was very moving, especially with all the students there, and I ended up in the middle of all the students, which got me to thinking, about what we're doing tonight, but also thinking about the fact that there's more to a town than just education, and education is the most important part of it. I completely understand and agree with that. But when we talk about protection of life, protection of property, that's important as well. So there are other things that we're working on at the present time, like people have brought up the EMS situation, or even protecting Matunic Beach Road from further issues. So those are just some of the things that we have to keep in mind as well. One of the biggest things that we don't really think about is that I think we talked about our paving plan. I think we're not looking great, in terms of being able to pave all the roads. I think it's going to take us, 40 years to pave all our roads if we keep up at the same?
At our current cycle,
right,
without any bonding or anything
which is
disrupt the rate.
Something that can't happen because it's impossible for roads to last that long. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I disagree with Alicia a little bit in terms of the Deborah Gist thing. I think the funding formula was kind of our doing in some respects, because I think if we had done things like some of the other districts at the time, that we wouldn't find ourselves in getting the negative all the time. The other thing that I want to mention that I think is very important for people to keep in mind is that, of course, we all want to fund as much as we possibly can. But I also feel that whichever way you go, if you go all the way to 4%, you go all the way to 0%. there's a definite threat, I think, in the community of a referendum, and I would hate for a referendum to happen. And I think it happened before, where South Road had to close abruptly. Before you, okay, yeah, I'm not. Lastly, well, a couple of last things real quick is we talk about cuts, and I understand there are cuts on your side, but from the town side, we're not cutting if we're giving more. I get that. And the last thing I just wanted to say, I'm just curious if we could get some information, or is there a good place to get information where our schools currently rank in the state? Would be, I'm sorry? Correct. Well, I don't know what you use to measure, but I see things in magazines. I don't know, there might be something recently in Rhode Island Monthly. I'm not sure what numbers they were using, but I think we were like 14th or something like that. So
the state and federal government don't rank that way. They do the ESSA stars for schools, and so I can give you that information.
Great. Thank you.
I just have a quick comment about the SMILES program, and I remember saying this, I think, last year. $17,000 investment with a $43,000 match sounds like a fantastic program. I don't care if we don't buy paper towel. We should be funding that. And is Doral still here? Yeah, the only thing you need to worry about is if we get up. You're the man.
Other comments up here at the table?
So I was here for the municipal budget meetings. I was here on the Monday, watched it from home on Tuesday, came back on the Wednesday, and I sat and I listened, and I came up and I told you I was listening. And it's very difficult to be up here in all of our roles, but to also be a taxpayer and to be in the situation we're in, because if we go forward and theoretically you give us 2.5 and then 6 months from now, theoretically we get 67 million, I'm taxing my own family out of the community. And I've said that in previous meetings, and I don't say it histrionically, I say it legitimately. So I hear when people come up and they say they move into the community with their kids because of the schools, but if we're taxing the families out of the school district, we're in this really bizarre place, and it's very difficult to advocate on either side because we all want the same thing, and we all want a wonderful school system, and we all want to fund everything as much as we could. And so we're over here kind of like doodling while everybody's talking, and it's like trying to figure a way to configure the schools, and come September, how can we look at our facilities and consolidate? And I think we have to get creative, maybe the building committee, we have to get creative in a way, and we've said no changes for September 2019 because it's too catastrophic, there's too much movement, but when I look at beyond 2.5 and say which is more catastrophic, doing a temporary move in September or losing all of this. And so I think, is 2.5 too much? Maybe. Is 1% too little? Yes. So I think, to the point is we need to work together as a group. Maybe the building committee is the group that facilitates that, but we have to come to some sort of happy medium that we're not taxing our families out of the district, but we're also not decimating our school system at the same time. There's got to be a way for us all to figure that out.
Mr. President, I had a conversation with Marianne Crawford today, and this relates, and we've actually heard a number of people commenting in the same vein tonight. Our process historically for budget has a pretty good set of locksteps, and the next step is for the council to adopt a preliminary council budget next Monday night. And then there's about a month where the council sort of gets to think about this and digest information from the community. There's nothing in the rules that would prevent us adding some process here. If the council and the school committee wanted to form a task force to sort of dive deep into this budget, we can do it. We're not prohibited from doing it. And this is a tough year, but as we've heard here tonight, it's not so much a tough year because the cuts that we have to make to stay under the 4%. It's a tough year because we know this is the beginning of a new normal. We know that the state formula gets us one more time next year, and after that, we're stuck with that or something like it, unless the formula changes radically the next time it's written. And part of our strategy, I suspect, needs to be for us to make sure that formula is different. But we need to think about the multi-year solution here. And the suggestion during the course of this conversation was we'd be willing to do anything we can to come to the table, get the two bodies together, or representatives from the two bodies together, and start moving toward a multi-year solution. So we offer that as a suggestion if the council and the committee are interested in some sort of subcommittees of the two bodies. The superintendent and I and the finance director and the school business official are happy to work with the committees and the council to do what we can to identify solutions for now. Again, I think we're largely constrained this year, but more importantly, as we're working through the immediate problem, maybe identify some solutions going forward.
Thank you. I think we'll have to take that into consideration. Any other comments up here at the table?
So I prepared some remarks so I wouldn't forget what I wanted to say. And the gist of what I wanted to say is that I keep saying it and saying it and saying it to people who don't get out and vote and then come back and complain about what's happened, right? So elections have consequences. And the most prominent example of the consequence of the last election is the resulting change in the ideology of the school committee. The focus has changed from what it was. And I think whatever happens with this budget happens. I agree with the speaker who said that, but it's most important that we implore the committee to have a plan for the future. We can't sustain a 2.5% increase year after year after year. It's impossible. So the change in that policy came with a consequence as well, and that's that the savings that were to be realized from that consolidation of the elementary schools is no longer possible. So we have to seek alternate answers. I don't know what those answers are, but you have to come up with them. You have to come up with a viable plan to stop the year after year increase in the facilities spending. I don't know how much more I can say about that. I don't think 3% this year is going to kill anybody. No one's going to move because the taxes went up 3% this year. But if they go up and compounding, go up 3% the next and the next and the next, we are going to price people out of this town. We're going to price people who have lived here a long time out of this town, whose property values when they bought them were $100,000 and now they're at $5,000, and they can't sustain that. So I just am really, really hoping that you folks have a plan, and soon have a plan to make the plan even very soon, and not this is taking too much of my time and I can't invest in it. You ran for office. Give us the time. We need it. We need it. Thank you.
I want to say that I appreciate the new school committee's dedication to that commitment. They've told us that they're going to work on doing a zero-based budget this coming summer when they have their retreat. I think school committee is probably already the most thankless position in municipal government around the country. And the fact that you're willing to forgo even your small stipends, for the next year says something, that you're willing to put in that time for our kids. And so it gets confrontational here, but I want to say thank you for going through the very difficult task of looking at cuts like that. We don't do that on our municipal side. We haven't lost a position that I can remember in my time on the council. And I know that every year you're cutting people. And it's not something easy to think about. So thank you for that. Any other comments up here?
I will say that the school committee also inherited a lot of issues or decisions that other school committees made, and so I don't totally understand where your sort of frustration with us and our planning comes from. To be honest, you can certainly reach out to us individually and talk to us about your concerns. It feels like a little bit of a grandstanding type thing, to be honest. It's like to say that, we need to give you the time. It just almost suggests like we're complaining about the amount of time that we're committing to our work, and I don't think any of us are. I think we are showing up, we're giving you our time, and we are doing the best, with what we have. And so I hope you'll find a way to communicate with us in a way that's not just a comment during a meeting, maybe, one-on-one, whatever it is. I think that would be helpful for the town in general.
I think perhaps the fact that you say we haven't had a chance to plan for the future speaks to me that you have not given it the thought process or the planning process that it needs to happen. So when you came into office, there was a plan, right, for consolidation that got scrapped, and that's fine. I mean, whatever is best for these children is what I'm in support of. Mm-hmm. And you folks as a body have come up with a decision that you feel is best for the children, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But there's no plan for the future, and that needs to be put in place as soon as possible.
I agree. I wouldn't, I would hesitate to say that the closure of Wakefield School was going to be this silver bullet that solved the school committee's problems, that solved the town's financial sort of, the issues that you talk about with raising taxes. The reality is that wasn't going to be a silver bullet. So I hear you. I think that we need to plan. And I like your idea of the task force, of, the committee and the town council, kind of like maybe looking into that and making some decisions.
The school committee met with the town council initially in December with a request of a 2.5% property tax transfer increase. Based on the inability of the school committee to provide specifics around that request, the town council concluded with directing and requesting the school committee to put together a budget with a 1% increase in the property tax transfer. The school committee has neglected that request and built their budget around a 2.5% property tax transfer increase. In my opinion, the school committee has lost their opportunity at a 2.5% increase. I think that we need to keep tight constraints around this budget, not only this budget season, but also in budgets going forward. I think we're starting to see more and more people in town being pushed out of town because of the cost of living increases in SK. We must plan accordingly and keep constraints around the budget to look for ways to control the tax increases. However, I do support education. I'm a huge advocate of the public schools in South Kingstown. I was a graduate of the SK High School in 2011, so I know firsthand the quality that is there. And the last thing I do want to see is public school education sacrificed in this town that I love. So For those reasons given, the max I'm willing to come out at is a 2% increase in the property tax transfer, and I consider that to be generous. I expect, and as it has been discussed here by Deb, that you guys need to come up with a long-term solution. I consider this 2% a generous increase, and I would not expect me to be at that place next year. You guys need to find solutions, long-term solutions to your budget problems. Thank you.
All right. Is that the note we want to end on? Anybody else have any more comments? I guess I'll just say thank you all for coming out tonight. This is our final budget work session. We'll be voting on the preliminary budget next Monday, as you heard. Please attend that if you'd like. Your input means a lot to us in this process as we move forward. Thank you. And this meeting is adjourned here at 10:20.